Test 1, 2. Yes. We have mics. Welcome. Hey, Vegas. How you doing? Welcome to the stream, man. Let me just see. Because I have... And then we got Goldie in the stream every time. So Goldie is my mod. And this dude is there like instantly every time a stream is on. Guys, can I introduce you to Meg if you didn't already get her on the last section?
Hello.
Thank
you.
You
want to double check that they're working? Can you just press on that screen on the top of the...
I can do that. Hold on. Yep. Yep, cool. I already see it. Yeah.
You want to double check?
Yes. Okay, Meg, I'm going to go away and you can talk and then we'll see if it talks.
Hello, everyone. Sorry.
This is perfect. I'm moving on screen. This is great.
I'm jealous. I really should have got some pointers before starting this from you, right?
No, why? They're here for everything about you.
Oh.
Good pointers in that. You're the fantastic.
And I'm also doing a mic check. Yep, so we're good.
Oh, this is good.
We are good. Base code is the boss. What you talking about? Flattery. Allow. I don't know if I've seen allow before in the chat, though it's not coming up as a new chatter, so welcome.
What category are you in?
I believe I'm in just chatting.
Really? Why is there drops?
What do you mean?
Subscribe to earn drops.
Do you want to, you can double check for me if you want.
Chat, so they're hearing them both loud and clear, left, right, or...
We are...
Can you hear everything good?
Sometimes, guys, like simple is better, but I've decided, you know what? Fuck it. We're going to be a little bit different. And have like, so we've got two cameras. Meg's got a camera. Meg's camera. I've got a camera. And also, check it out. Set the scene. You all can see the popcorn.
Yeah. Sorry for the mouth noises.
I've
I
got
will be eating the whole time.
I've got my questions here, and we can jump back to chat like this. Ready? Look at me, guys. I was a noob, but I'm streaming now. It's getting better. I'm getting better. So yeah, we've got the split mode, which I think is also pretty cool. So while we're talking, might not be too, how do I explain it? Might not be too like chat interactive. If you guys drop messages, I'll, yeah, multicam Goldie, you're right. And audio's good, Spiral. That's good to hear, man. Thank you for the feedback. I'm glad because, yeah, we've got these different like separate mics so we don't have to like crowd around the same microphone. I was just saying to Meg, like, none of this stuff is my gear. I get to show up and just like mooch off Fastfee's awesome gear. So yeah, if the quality is decent,
really.
That's right. Absolutely. Me and Meg have been joking about that. I'm a bit of you know, relying on some nepotism to get ahead, but it's I feel like I'm learning. I'm learning at the same time. If I don't choke on my popcorn, that is. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting stream, guys. I think before we really get into it, we'll just finish up like testing the rest of the. Also, by the way, there's presentations. Ready? Boom. Presentation time. Widescreen chatting time. Split screen, and then chat your messages. So pretty cool, right? I think I've done a decent job. Though I think the goal is, guys, to do more of these. I'm going to be talking with, hopefully, if this one goes well and you guys like it, I'll be talking to a bunch of different people from the games industry. Meg's a good friend, and so she's been really nice to like be the prototype and try and figure it out for the first time. So yeah, she's coming along, and you know, it might not be too structured, it might not be too formal, but at the same time, show off, and here I am with my basic set and a $5 capture card. Hey, look, man, doesn't need to be sophisticated. Doesn't need to be like, you just need to do it. That was what Fast was saying. She's like, just set up OBS and hit go live and then figure the rest out. So, I mean, yeah, it's handy to have all this stuff here, but I'm still going to be doing like super basic streams when I'm back in Brisbane. But yeah, for now, I think, yeah, I may as well use the tools when they're around because they're pretty baller.
Yeah, you'd be stupid not to while you've got it here, right?
Right? Absolutely.
It's definitely the most sophisticated stream I've ever been on.
That's
and I haven't done very many.
How many streams have you been on now?
I'll probably only about 3 or 4.
The thing is, guys, Meg has actually been on a lot of different streams. Whoa, there we go. That's the raid. That's the Raid with Fast
Yay!
Fish people. Welcome, guys. I hope this was a good segue. Look, guys. You've seen the cooking stream, and now you'll see the
And
eating
it tastes
stream.
amazing.
Yeah, it's so good. It's such a good meal. Really lucky. I'm gonna have to talk her into doing more of these in the future. But yeah, we're kind of just hanging out on the couch. For a while, guys, if you've been following along, I've been saying that I was going to do some streams where, you know, we're making stuff at Actuator and making computer games. And on my stream, I keep saying I want to make games, and that's what you know, that's what this stream is going to be about. But as a studio director, I've also been through the journey of trying to like do the business side of things and do the rest of it.
The hell side of everything.
Yeah, the not as fun side of making computer games. And so who I have with me here is Megan Summers. You are currently the release manager at Tantalus North, which is, yeah, I mean, I'll let you tell yourself, tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, so release manager at Tantalus North. We're a Keywords studio, so Keywords is one of the biggest games companies in the world that no one's ever heard of, because we're a service company, which is currently at the moment one of the maybe a little bit more stable side of the industry. I'm getting older and I like my job, so
stability and
a little bit of
matter.
stability is nice. But really, I've done it all. I was a games tester for 15 years, ran my own company, made my own games. Successfully and unsuccessfully.
Yeah, I think the unsuccessful ones are sometimes the most interesting stories too, because like, you know, the stats were showing that on average, the third game the studio releases is the one that breaks even, and most studios don't survive to, like, only 10% of studios survive into their third year of operations, right?
Yeah.
And it's very hard to make 3 games in 3 years if they're going to be decent games.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's
and it's kind of crazy, even like those statistics to me still seem insane, because
insanely like good or
Angry Birds was Rovio's 30th game and they were about to go under. And so like the things that we see as like this company just came out of nowhere, it's like, no, you just hadn't heard of them yet. They were working their ass off in the background.
Exactly. I think like Rovio and like Among Us is another great example where that game just like operated on stealth mode for years and years and years and years before it had this, like, actually it was Twitch. Twitch made the difference to that game. It kind of just like launched and took off from there. It's yeah, Twitch I think can be a really great platform for creating and like marketing. And look at that, Vasta's behind the scenes here, setting us up with decent lights.
Pretty.
How nice is that?
Thank you. I need you to just follow me around in life. That would be wonderful.
Thank you, Paz. Thank you. But yeah, okay, look, I prepared this earlier. Here's an intro I prepared earlier. Okay. I think.
Watching myself.
So for those who are just joining, I have set this up in a way where I'm going to be speaking with Meg for the most part. I do actually have chat up here, so I can see your messages, guys. And so I'm gonna ask Meg a few questions. We're gonna have a bit of back and forth, and then we're going to switch to chat, where we're gonna just like recap some of the messages here. And then we'll go back into some more questions. So please like queue up some questions for us to answer. And I mean, before we do that, I'm gonna let this, so Meg did a really great talk at GCAP a while ago. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Australian games industry, but GCAP is like Games Connect Asia Pacific.
Yeah.
It's like the Game Developer Conference. It's like GDC, but the Australian version of that. And so yeah, she spoke there and gave a really good talk, and I would recommend you guys check it out. But I'm just gonna quickly like run what was there from that, so she can give the introduction.
Who am I, and why is it worth listening to me talk today? So I'm the release manager up at Tantalus North. I started my career in QA in 2007, just before the financial crisis. My first company was at Pandemic, which then became EA. I was lucky enough to also work at Chrome and THQ, where I worked on approximately 10 games, and that was when I first started seeing the certification process, what it was, from a very low-level QA point of view. Prior to joining Tantalus North, I ran a small indie games company for about 14 years with my best mate. It was called Screwtape Studios, and my co-founder is Anthony Wood. I'll always give him a shout out. We created and released numerous original IP games. You probably haven't heard of any of them, but our biggest game was Damsel, which we released on all platforms. We also, by the end of our career in indie, we provided freelance release management, QA, certification, testing, and engineering porting services. And we were lucky enough to work on the ports of Void Bastards, Webbed, and Unpacking. Was just the two of us working by the end of our time there. So we did not have a choice but to hone our certification and testing processes intensely. I was also lucky enough in the middle of that time to get to work at Defiant Development as a lead QA on both Hand of Fate 1 and 2. And now I work at Tantalus North. I have worked as both the product manager and now release manager. And I also manage our QA team. And I've worked on multiple projects, including City Skylines Remastered and Horizon Chase 2 for both PS4 and Xbox Series X. And these are my cats, because you know what I look like.
All right, there we go. So I figure that's a good way to do an introduction. We could ask Meg to talk about herself again, but she did such a great job at GCAP that we may as well just run that. But yeah, that really, like, I think from here in that talk, if you guys want to go and follow it up and have a look at it, she goes straight into how you should prepare and release for quality assurance, and specifically passing certifications on different platforms, which is like Meg's an expert at that. She's managed to position herself really well in the industry to be like the person to go to if you want to get your game certified. And I think that was a lot because Damsel launched on every platform.
Yeah,
right?
we did all platforms for Damsel, except for mobile, obviously, which has its own certification side to it. It's really interesting. Most indie devs, especially doing their first game, it's easy to get out on Steam. You don't even think necessarily about what it takes to get onto a console. And so most devs don't even realize that, like, there is a full set of rules that you have to have your game pass to be able to launch on all three platforms. Some of those rules are the same, some of them are different. And so
I know when we went through On Point with Steam, we were like, okay, we set this release date. Now we just we go into the Steam portal and we hit go live. And what happened was like a day before it, I was scrolling through the things and I was like, oh, okay, we have to do this like review thing. And then I did it, and then it was like pulling my hair out because I was expecting it to just like go live within hours of clicking that button, like every other asset I'd uploaded to the store. But it didn't. It took 3 days, and so we announced a launch date, and actually ended up hitting the market like after it in the middle of Next Fest. So
oh no!
yeah, we missed the first day of Next Fest essentially. Because we didn't have this proper release management.
And you don't even know half the time what are the questions you even need. Like, there's a document there somewhere that tells you on all of it, but not even knowing the questions that you need to ask to be able to answer it. And so
I now see the value of doing that, and I'll never go through the process of releasing a game without preparing properly for a release in the way that you've made yourself an expert in doing. And that's just for one platform. That's just for Steam, which is the easiest of all the platforms probably to launch on, right?
Yeah, Steam and Android. They have the least requirements.
Yeah.
Everything else, and even Android, I think will get maybe a little bit harder.
Yeah.
So many of the things like purchasing and child protection, and they're all governed by countries that you want to sell in.
Right.
And mostly in the EU sets legislation, so it changes the rules that you have to abide by. But I kind of fell into it. Like, I've been doing it since my, third game? So the first 2 games I worked on at Pandemic, and yes, indeed, RIP Pandemic Voodoo. Mercenaries 2, I had a chance to test for a little bit of time, and still one of my favorite games. I can still crash it in the tutorial because they never fixed a bug that I found.
Yeah.
But there is... The first 2 games in my whole career were unannounced, unreleased, and then both of the studios went under.
Oh man.
And
I mean, this is a good segue to like, you should rewind for us and go back to the start. Tell us how you got to the point where you were. Fastfy actually started, I don't know if you guys all know this, but Fastfy's first job in the games industry was also as QA at the Binary Mill. She used to do the testing in the same way that sounds like you started doing it.
it is a fantastic. I hate the idea of it only being a stepping stone, but it is an amazing way into the industry. So I was doing a theatre degree. I left that because, you know, I wanted to make money in my life. And then
Great gig that. Good way to get rich
right.
is the theatre.
Yeah, and I didn't want to do movies. I wanted to do theatre because that was it.
The theatre.
The theatre. Even smarter
Theatre.
choices. And then I dropped out of that degree, started a drama degree because that was going to be more useful. And then dropped out of that degree. I failed everything in my second year, first semester, except for introduction to multimedia technology. This is how old I am.
Yeah.
Like multimedia technology was the words for computers, but not engineering. Like,
Yeah.
And so I decided to leave uni. I was going to go do a TAFE diploma. I was like, I'll do something with computers because that's going to be a thing
Computers
that I
make
will
money.
always.
Yeah.
I'll always be able to make money if I do something with computers. So this would have been 20 years ago now. And
Very different landscape from now.
It really, there was the QUT degree in Brisbane, which was the first full university degree, had just started.
Yeah.
Or was just about to start. And quantum was around.
Quantum was definitely around. I think I was in the first year of the QUT degree that which ran, which was a few years after that. It would have been 2014, I think, or 2015.
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
Because Anthony, my business partner, so we were together at the time.
Yeah.
We both
this is an interesting thing to drill into, actually, guys. If Meg doesn't mind, like, some personal questions, Meg, at Screwtape Studios, the studio she ran, she co-founded it with her partner. And
well, actually, I co-founded it with my ex.
Yeah. Was he your ex when you started it?
He was.
Yeah, okay.
But we both found a diploma in multimedia majoring in games development on the same day. Mm-hmm. We went to TAFE together. We were together. Mm-hmm. We went to TAFE. We didn't tell anyone that we were dating.
Yeah.
Because especially as a woman back then in the industry, I didn't want people to think I was only doing the course because my boyfriend was.
That's another interesting angle to discuss too, and maybe we can circle back to this later, but like being that much time ago, the games industry was a very male-centric place, and it's changing. Things are improving.
It is amazingly different. One thing I always do say is we talk a lot about the bad side of things when we're talking about diversity and inclusion. Oh my God, it's gotten so much better. I like to always try to talk about the positives as well.
I do actually have a note to circle back and talk about that.
Awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to get a rough sense of like your career and how you wound up to be a person reputable for a particular thing, and you know how you found yourself to be working in a really good AAA position.
Well, just before I finished my diploma, so the diploma was great. It was like a little bit of engineering, a little bit of programming, a little bit of design, a little bit of art.
Yeah.
We still made something at the end. We started mid-year, so there was only 8 of us, and then only 7 of us graduated. Mm-hmm. But
so 8 people in the entire degree?
In the entire course. So it was so tiny.
And in fact, mean you get a lot of attention from your
we really did. And in
lecturers?
fact, there's somebody else, Cade Franklin, who he's a games designer. He works at Defiant. He's actually on. He's the Cade Franklin from Lego Masters.
Ah, cool.
He was in the first round. They won.
Is this like Defiant today, or Defiant at its peak, or he
both
lasted through the peak?
Yeah.
Wow.
And so the 3 of us, me, Anthony, and him, were all part of that 7 that graduated. And I didn't know what I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. I really liked animation.
Yep.
But I kind of didn't know whether I wanted to do it as a job. And 2 of my lecturers in particular, which is Chris and Justin Carter, who now run the Griffith degree. Yeah. They were like, look, QA is a great way to get in. It's a great way to learn.
I didn't actually know that connection.
Yeah, they were my...
I would love to have Chris and Justin either of those guys.
They would
for a conversation
definitely
like this.
jump
Yeah.
in for this,
Yeah.
right? Like, and it's a whole different side because they've come from their own work, but then also academia.
Yeah.
And so I just started applying for QA jobs. And
Yep.
at the time, Brisbane was, right now, Melbourne is the game
It's the hub.
development
Yeah, it's the
settle.
beating heart of the games industry in Australia. Though I
But
think
back then,
Queensland is
Brisbane
making
was going to be
right.
the next Silicon Valley for games.
Yep.
We had Pandemic, Chrome, which was at the time the largest independent games company.
THQ as well.
THQ,
Sega?
Sega,
Yep.
Creative Assembly,
Yep.
when that got bought out. We had Oren, which was another company, Australian company. Kixeye ended up coming in, and then the GFC hit. So that was how I got into games. I got in as QA. I worked. Pandemic was my first studio. I was there when EA bought them out, which was, it's so weird. Like, it was this big, shiny, oh my God, this world that I was in. And technically the game was never announced, so...
Was this,
but it was a Batman game.
Blade Kitten? Oh, no.
So this was a Batman game, and I'm a giant nerd. My cats in that picture are Bruce Wayne and Selena Kyle. And so I walked into this game studio, and there's just phenomenal concept art everywhere. Some of the most technically proficient and most intensely creative people were all in this one room, and they treated me like their little sister and took me under their wing. And
but see, this all happened, and I see Goldie's message here. Like, Goldie's 100% on the money. This is like, when you talked about the GFC, that's when I exited studies and entered the games industry. And it was like, I was looking around going into uni and being like, oh, there's so many great places to work. And then I finished my degree, and it was like just a collapse. Walked into a vacuum. Suddenly there was nothing, and all of the opportunities completely disappeared.
It was terrifying. Within like 800 meters in the valley, there were 500 or 600 games jobs, and then all of a sudden they were all gone. And I was the second last round at Pandemic EA before they shut down. I then went to Chrome. I did 10 months at Chrome and was let go. The poor HR manager from Pandemic went over to Chrome, and she had to let me go twice in 10 months.
That would have sucked. But it's a smart move to like, be greedy when others are fearful, and fearful when others are greedy. For a game studio, like, to take a HR manager is a great way to also have a hiring manager who knows who's good, right?
And Chrome picked up like 70% of Pandemic while they went under.
I mean, that might have helped them accelerate at the same time into their, that might have accelerated their demise. It's an interesting...
And it was that time in the industry, right, where you just didn't know. And then went straight to THQ after that. And then by the time I was leaving THQ, everything was going. Like, everything was gone then.
Very quickly it all disappeared.
It really did. And at that point, Ant, who was at this point, we were still living together, but he was my ex. He was graduating. He's like, well, what do we do? Like, he'd done the design degree, I think, at QUT. I mean, he did the design major, but he's one of those. He's like you. He's engineering, design. He's able to do both of it. I hate you both.
I mean,
like,
you need to do that. That's the thing. It's like, if you want to make a computer game yourself, it's everything. It's like, it's engineering, it's the math, it's the computer science, it's like understanding physics for some kind of games, it's the networking, it's the like, and then it's the art, animation, 3D modeling, texturing. It's like the number of things you need to do to make a game is massive.
Because he can also graphic
design. And he's one of those like super multi-talented people.
Let's not boost him up too much.
I mean, I've had very little to do with him, but I've spoken to him about, like, he's very willing to learn and jump into new things. He seems to be doing this with AI right now, which is a thing I'm exploring on my stream as well, because I think it's the future of how games will be done. Whether you like it or not, it's coming, right?
Yeah, right? It's a tool that we're going to have to use. How you use it will be the thing. But I think that's one of the most important
Full stack,
things.
that's right, just some guy.
Yeah. The most important thing I think that I have learned throughout my career is you never stop learning. If you don't want to keep learning, this industry is probably not for you.
Yeah.
because we move so quickly. There is always something, whether it's the market changes and you've got to pivot for your product,
Yeah.
or you've got to change what tools you're
Yeah.
using. There's a PS6 now, or
Yeah.
you know, like everything is constantly
Yeah.
changing. And if you're not, like, you cannot be good at everything, but if you are good at learning,
Yeah.
that kind of sets
Yeah,
you
yeah,
up
yeah, yeah.
for.
Yeah.
It was one of
So,
our
so you're
rules.
absolutely right. Like when the industry changes and when, you know, it changes regularly, sometimes you have to pivot. But I think this is, if I'm not mistaken, this is where Screwtape Studios began.
Yep. So the iPhone had just
Mhm.
been released in Australia.
Mhm.
Fruit Ninja had just come out
Yep.
from
Half Brick
people
was
we
doing
knew
big
at
things.
Half Brick. They were just around the
Yep.
corner.
Yep.
And we kind of went,
I mean, Luke
I
Muscat
do.
is
I
another
have
person.
met Adam Bailey. I do. Oh my God. Okay, first design team. I know of Adam. We've definitely met before.
Yeah. Okay. See, Goldie is one of our game developer. He's super active in this community. I'd say like he's the most active person in this chat and
Hell
very
yeah.
connected to games. And it's a small world, isn't it,
It-
Goldie? When you get down to it, it's from South Australia. But Adam Bailey, like, so he even knows Queensland people up here.
It is
Yeah.
so, it's almost incestuous. We all know each other too well.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
so yeah, we
So
kind
yeah,
of,
Jess is right. I think this is around 2008, a little bit later, and then Screwtape happened. And
yeah,
so the
2000.
same thing happened with the binary mill. Like they were like mobile phones are going up. The rest of the industry is going down. So let's go and do the thing that's going to grow. Adam, okay.
Yeah, okay, that's why, yeah. So we
Right. So we're both reading your message there, Goldie. And so yeah, it sounds like Adam now works for Tantalus South. So
and I work with all of the studios within Keywords Australia on a pretty regular basis now.
but that's such a powerful thing. You must get to meet so many different people.
I do. I really love it. It's part of my job that I enjoy.
Yeah.
But there are people. So I was in a room yesterday in Melbourne and ran into somebody that I used to work with at Pandemic and hadn't seen in 17 years.
Yeah, okay.
And so everyone sort of circles back around and comes back together.
This is one of the things I miss about, but like I would consider myself an indie, guys. Like I've created my own studio and I'm doing cool stuff there, but like I don't get to do what Megan's doing, where she's constantly meeting you really, really, really talented people from like a huge number of different titles as well. It's like, yeah.
At the moment, my context switching brain is on, but I kind of was lucky enough that at the very beginning, because it all happened so quickly, that everything went under really quickly.
Yeah.
Like my first 2 years, I worked on 7 games.
Right.
And was at 3 different studios.
Yeah, Jesus.
And I think it actually, as much as it was
I don't know if I worked on 7 games in my entire career. It's like,
and
no,
I will
maybe
not
I
say
have,
that all
but-
of those were good games.
Yeah.
But some of them were phenomenal games that never got released. And so, yeah, we started making little mobile games.
Yeah.
And in fact, we came at markets. We didn't have a successful game for quite a while. And our problem was every time we released something, the model changed. So within less than a month of releasing one of our most successful games, which was called Bank Job, and it was a little infinite runner, but rather than being tapped, and it was like tap to stop.
Yeah.
And it was like a little.
What was the team dynamic at this point? Was it just?
It was technically just me and Anthony.
Yeah.
No, Bank Job. We had an artist with us. At this point, we were paying $50 rent in an ex-tattoo parlor that had gunshots, like there were gunshot holes in the glass and like bars on the windows.
Wow.
But what our artist,
Was this the studio?
this was our
That's
studio.
the most badass studio location ever.
And our artist, his parents were real estate agents, and they were like, "Look, no one wants to rent this place.
Right.
Just
use
give us an
for-
arbitrary amount of money, and we'll let you all do this."
That's cool.
And so we had him, and we had an animator, Stuart, who's off doing amazing things now, and then a designer, Chris. That was sort of the biggest we'd built up. Before that, we probably spent 2 years, just me and Ant, or, we'd had some people come in and out, but we were still figuring out how to even make a game.
Yeah.
I was only QA at this point. He was just exiting uni.
Yeah.
And your end of year projects are very much depends on the team that you're with, depends
Very
on how
much.
much it actually gets finished.
Yeah.
I think he had to have an intervention because one of his animators had a drug problem. So they got a lot done in that final
Yeah, okay,
project.
okay. Yeah.
So we threw stuff at the wall. We made and released a couple of little mobile games, but Bank Job was the one that hit. And I remember one night waking up and we'd had 13,000 downloads in France because
Yeah, wow.
our little criminal he had that very French look to him. It was in that French cartoon look. It was
Okay.
the style we'd gone for.
Yeah.
And then about 3 weeks later, everyone stopped buying premium games and everything went free to play.
Right.
And you cannot shoehorn in free to play mechanics.
Yeah.
It is not it's not easy. And so we spent months trying to what if people bought hats and those hats had power-ups?
Yeah.
And
I mean, everybody did this. We did this at the binary mill. It was
there was no choice.
Suddenly the model changed.
The market he did have a French moustache. I think that's why it worked so well.
So yeah, we've got a few questions here that we should. No, I mean we've been answering them as we go, actually, haven't we? So I don't feel too bad about that. But yeah, he did have a French moustache. But ask some questions here, guys, and for a little while before we move on to the next few questions, we might try and answer some of the things some of your questions instead of some of mine.
That is maybe a really interesting one. What does QA actually entail? Because that is a big misconception, and it's something I had no idea. And so often people are like, "Oh, you're just playing the game, right?"
Yeah.
You are playing a piece of software that is half built, especially as you get QA on early on in the process. So there is a bare bones. Like the first game I worked on, there were no missions. There was no design. They just got the world built and a character. And it was testing. That one, it was like, can you walk through walls? If I run over to this location, do I fall through the ground? And because it was a bespoke engine at the time,
that makes things so much harder. Yeah.
All of our
all
buildings
your
were modular.
Need to change. Yeah.
And they didn't snap.
Right.
So I spent weeks going around the world finding everywhere that there was a tiny gap. And then you'd take a screenshot, you'd get the location of the coordinates in game. And then, so it's everything from, so you know how with software, you get a manual and it tells you how to use the piece of software. And if you do something you're not meant to do, they're just like, well, don't do that. That breaks all immersion in a video game.
Yep.
There's the two sides of games testing is what's the game meant to do? So does the design work?
Yep.
When I have this piece of armor and this sword, does it give me the right XP count when I'm hitting that enemy? Does the animation work when I'm hitting the enemy? But then there's also what can the game do? What can I do in this game? I want to be able to run anywhere, do anything. And if it breaks, that destroys my experience of the game. So you've got design testing, you've got engineering testing, you have a little bit of play testing, which is how does the design work? But I find that's really hard with QA because you're playing it half done, you're playing it at first iterations, having the chance to actually have an opinion on something that's half done. You are seeing something before the vision is done. So your opinion needs to be delicate. It needs to be I'm not going to tell you what I think it should be. I'm going to tell you what I'm experiencing right now and why it's not necessarily feeling fun.
Yeah.
So a designer can go, okay, awesome. Yeah, that bit's not done yet.
Yeah.
But then if they're like, oh no, I was expecting something completely different to be experienced there, then you can pivot. But if you pivot too early, you can lose complete guidance. You can,
So yeah, I mean, quality assurance there's obviously a lot more to it than just some people think it's just sit there and play games all day, but it's really, it's not the case like that. And, people who put in the work to be good games testers, it's a really, really difficult skill to master and do well, because doing it poorly can actually slow the process down more than it accelerates it, right?
100%. And how many games have we played where they are buggy? It has ruined an experience.
Yeah.
But getting to start my career like that,
Yeah.
learning how to deconstruct a game, learning what affected what. So
Yeah.
when somebody fixed this problem,
Yeah.
these are the things that it changed in
Yeah.
game, meant that my pivot over to to production
Yeah.
and figuring out how to put a game together,
Yeah.
it became second nature
Yeah.
to me to know what steps need,
Yeah.
you've got to rig before you can animate. Like,
Yeah. So I see you've got a question there, just some guy about the thoughts of AI in game development, i.e. coding, asset level development, character voicing, etc. I mean, Meg's area of expertise, like how do you think that's going to affect things like do you think QA will be different now?
I think all AI in games is going to become a tool that gets you quicker from 0 to 3. But then we still need people to get you from 3 to 10.
Yeah.
There is still the art of the creation. There is still, I don't know yet whether I haven't seen it proven that we can make something from 0 to 10 and have it be unique and fun. And
in some sense, my experience of AI has been that the volume of work you can create increases, but the quality of the work decreases.
Yep.
In some sense, to answer, if I can answer on your behalf, just some guy, I think the role of QA in game development with the rise of AI may become even more important, because you'll need to do less of the AI. You'll need to do less of the coding. The thing that we're going to need a lot more than we've ever needed before is what Meg does, is quality assurance. It's ensuring that the thing really works quite well. But yeah,
there's definitely some automation and AI in QA that is useful. Like there's a lot of stress testing. So if you've got a online multiplayer game, but you've got a team of 5 QA on your team, you can't emulate that. If you have 30,000 people in the first hour playing, testing your servers, stress testing, all of the different scenarios of how many players playing how many players. So you can using AI to automate a lot of that testing is definitely something that is already happening and is actually, it's freeing up testers, QA, to be doing a lot more of the exploratory. What if a player presses A when they're running and the game is loading? Those kind of things. So I think it's a tool we are going to, whether you like it or not, we're going to have to work with. Do I have ethical issues with some things like art?
That's probably what
voice
Just Some Guy is
acting?
getting at when he asks this.
And I do. I came from theatre.
Yeah.
But I don't think the moral issues with it is going to stop it from happening.
No.
And if we don't learn how to use it and learn how to use it well, I think we'll end up in a place where it's being used anyway and it's not being used well. And then we're just getting this homogenous glop of stuff that we're then like, well, no one's making games otherwise. And I use it for things that I don't do well. I use AI all the time for anything maths related. Anything I'm like, oh God, I could do this.
You have to be so careful with it. You have to QA that math, because it hallucinates. It really does.
And the maths I'm making it do is pretty simple. I'm just terrible at maths. So, figuring out negative 30% of something and then adding 5. I'm like, oh, just AI do it for me.
I feel like it's better for a calculator to do that than AI is getting better at, to be fair. There's a question here from Jess that I actually think really relates to one of your soapboxes, Meg. So he's asking, he didn't think about testing in the early phases of the game.
Day one.
Just wait, Jess. Have you asked a question?
QA on a good project should start on day one, even if it's only one tester. You're setting up build pipelines. You're setting up you're setting up your processes, QA should always be part of that process. I'm a big proponent. So old school testing, end of the project, build a day, tick off a list of everything that works. The way I look at QA is there not one task, not one piece of code is signed off by anyone but QA. It doesn't exist if it's not in the build and you can't use it.
Right.
Like, if it's crashing the build, then what's the point? It means that somebody can't do their work.
Yeah.
Because you as an engineer can't go in and grab the build and grab the code and then add the next piece in, because it's you're building on a foundation that is not solid. So
how do you feel about practices like so engineers sometimes do QA with pull requests and with code reviews before they get merged into the main branch? Now, this is engineering work. It's not necessarily like quality assurance. It's not considered quality assurance. This is a responsibility, but it's very much a part of the quality assurance process, right?
100%. So every engineer, designer, anyone checking in anything should have tested their own work in their own environment with the code that they've got right now.
Yep.
QA's job should never be to test your work. It should be to test how your work works with everyone else's
More
work.
about integration than about...
So we do mostly, on most projects that I possibly can. It's not always possible, depending on what clients, where we're getting builds from. We do continuous integration testing. So 5 or 6 times a day, when enough check-ins have happened, QA will grab a build. It means that you have a much more granular ability.
So you're talking about human continuous integration?
Yes.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah. For the software developers here, they're probably thinking it's like CI/CD. It's like automated triggered tests where like your code is pulled, the new version is run, it checks if the tests all still pass. But you're talking about like a person actually going and replaying the changes.
Yeah, because when it comes to building a test suite for continuous integration testing from an engineering point of view, you are testing it's that idea of you're testing if it's going to work the way it should, not what else can it do. And so if QA has bite-sized pieces of, okay, well, this has just changed in the animation system. I know that I'm going to go around with this animation system. If I get hit, it worked. He tested that it worked. It works. But if I press A 5 times, jump, and then get hit, is it going to glitch out when I'm doing that? And so the smaller chunks that you can give QA, if you've got one build a day and you've got 35 check-ins, breaking each one of those down, testing around the check-in, it's so much more laborious. But if you've got 1 or 2 changes and you've got 45 minutes before the next build's coming off, that's 45 minutes dedicated to just those 2 changes. And as an engineer knows, if it's broken, if I haven't checked in anything else after I broke it, it's easier to fix. Like if you're not
the area
building
in which
a wall,
you need to search for the change that broke it reduces dramatically.
Exactly.
Right? This is like the Toyota production system. It's like keep batch size small. This is one of the big principles in a book called The Lean Startup. I should absolutely recommend this to you guys if you want to read it. Even if you're just trying to make like computer games, the principles there can really help. Just not in terms of like how to make a successful startup, but how to build software in a way that mitigates risk and reduces cost. It's like and is more stable ultimately at the end of the day. So we've got a few other messages. Hey, we've got a first-time chatter here. Good to see you. Want to hear a pizza joke? It's too cheesy. Okay, thanks for the joke, Lone Wolf.
We have a dad jokes channel at work, so I very much appreciate that joke. Thank you.
Code would have automated unit tests. But yeah, I thank you, Goldie, too, for trying to keep things on track. Because we have Meg for a finite amount of time, and I actually have a list of questions here that I want to get to. So we're going to jump back to the split screen, and I'm going to ask a bit more about. So you had a few releases, and then what made you as a studio decide to do Damsel? Because it was a big risk, right? It was suddenly a big. Before that, actually. I'm going to, let's just run the trailer for Damsel so you guys have context.
Bruce and Selena, yes, I am a DC fan.
Oh, sorry. And go.
So over the years, I have been very lucky to work with some amazing teams on some amazing games. But I have watched many of these teams make the same mistakes. Not on purpose, not planning to, but they always had the same outcome. These issues technically become smaller problems the more games you've released. Because console certification requirements update on a regular basis, you are very rarely an expert in the current platform. So the mistakes that people have made, they start thinking about console requirements really late. Usually around beta, they're like, okay, awesome, we've done the game. Now I've got to figure out how to release the game. This usually means that the requirements are not being thought about when building the systems that the game is going to be tested during console certification. Wow, okay.
I realize the sound may have messed up there, guys. My apologies for that. I think Meg's GDC talk was running at the same time as Damsel was running there. But yeah, that gives you some context about what happened. Yeah, sorry guys, I'm figuring it out as I go. But yeah, Damsel was a big project compared to smaller projects. Was this like for us, there's still a big project sitting in the background at Actuator that we want to make, and one day I hope to have the time to do it. But what we made an active decision to say, okay, no, we're not going to work on this project. We're going to shelve it, and we're going to do something small and achievable. And that was On Point. And On Point even then turned into so much bigger than you expected it to be. The scope blew out. It became much bigger, and to some extent, it's a game I'm very proud to have made. But I think it's still not like the game.
Yep.
Was Damsel the game for you?
No. It was.
So what
it
was
was
the
next
motivation behind
step.
creating it? That's the.
So we started in mobile. We made some games. We had a little bit of success. We weren't making enough money to. We weren't making enough money to support ourselves 100%.
But you were making money with the games you'd already released.
Tiny little bits of money, really not that much in the end. We were eating ramen and hand to mouth. We were in our early 20s, not really paying my parents' rent when we were living at their place, and then my mum got sick, and my mum passed away. Like my dad had already passed away just before we started the studio, and then my mum got sick, and
that must have been a really hard time in your life.
It broke so much, but it also put so much in perspective. And so we sort of put the company on hold a little bit. And we had these mentors, Morgan Jaffett and Dan Treble. Yeah, I had worked with Morgan and Dan and Sean Eustace.
So Morgan is Defiant.
Yeah, the three of them were the three founders of Defiant. And I'd worked with them at Pandemic. And they knew what was happening in my life. And they knew that Anthony was just sort of sitting around waiting. And so while I was at home looking after my mum, because I took 4 months off and was her primary caregiver in the last 4 months. And they were like, look, we've got a job for Ant. Don't worry, we're not stealing him. We know you want to come back. And get back into games.
So he outsourced from Screwtape to Pandemic.
To Defiant.
For Defiant at the time.
Yeah, and so he worked for them.
Cash flow for the company going.
Yeah. And then they were like, look, if you want to, rather than going straight back into the company, we have this game that we're working on, and we'd love you to come and do QA.
Yeah.
And I was like, I think I need a little time. Not, you know what it's like running a company.
So
it's
hard.
Everything, right?
Especially when you're making a game and when there's no money coming in, it becomes everything. Everything you do is aligned behind getting it finished and getting it out.
And we hadn't even started.
I can't imagine doing that with the pressure of like the death of a loved one in my life. That must have been hugely stressful for you.
It was. And like we hadn't even thought about what the next big game was going to be yet. So we sort of put the mobile games on hold. And then that game was Hand of Fate. It was Hand of Fate 1.
Yeah. Oh, what a banger. That game was great.
It was so the best thing that came out of the GFC and the best thing that will come out of everything that's happening in the industry right now is like that spiral out.
Yeah.
That next thing that occurs that was the indie boom.
Yeah.
We were in a massive studio system. It was mostly AAA games. You had the occasional little indie studio, Valve being one of them.
Yeah.
Valve
See, not
and
a
id
little
before they
indie.
were still indies.
Yeah.
But then this indie boom that happened, especially in Australia. So Defiant took us on.
Mm.
It was actually where I
Pretty smart as a business owner now, understanding why they would do that. Like the flexibility of contractors, especially talented ones who have shipped products.
Yeah.
That's
and it was actually where I first did certification
yeah.
on my own.
Yeah.
Just that little company,
Just some
Valve.
guy. I think I've heard of Valve. Yeah.
But so we then got a chance to work on this immensely. I got to work on a couple of other games that they did, like Ski Safari, and they did Ski Safari Adventure Time. And so the first game he ported, though, was doing Hand of Fate
Yeah.
for, it would have been the Xbox 360 and PS, I think it was just PS4. It was like the first year of the PS4.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like it's a tough thing, right, Goldie? It's the stress and pressure of that. It's so hard to do it when life is good, let alone when life is bad.
and you never expect. Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition.
No one expects the Spanish Inquisition.
And it's something that most of us, unfortunately, will experience. But you never know about it. You never plan it, and you never know how it's going to shape you afterwards.
Yeah.
And it gave me drive. It was all of a sudden, both my parents passed away at 64, so they were young.
It was a sense of
They
like
were both
life
still
is
working.
short.
Like,
Don't-
let's get out my ass into gear.
Yeah.
And then working at Defiant, working on this much bigger creative game, just gave us both this boost of, okay, the next game has to be bigger.
Yeah.
We don't want to do mobile anymore.
Yeah.
If it's now or never, if we never get to make another game, then let's just balls to the walls, go for it.
So
And
making games, I know firsthand. I put my life savings into trying to make a game. It's expensive. So big games like that, like how did you make it happen?
So I had an inheritance.
Yeah.
I made the decision to split a giant chunk off.
Yeah.
I invested it in the company. I invested in the game.
That's a huge decision.
I was so like, I didn't even, the stupidest thing is I didn't even really think. I just went, well, this, I'm what, 7 years into this career. I don't know how to do anything else.
Yeah.
I'm unskilled outside of this industry. At this point in time as well, software companies didn't want to hire games QA because they didn't think it was legitimate.
Right.
Without realizing that actually it's kind of almost more intense because of like what
games
you
are
can,
always more intense than software. That's been my experience of it.
Same.
They're software on hard mode. They're the hardest kind of software to make, full stop.
Exactly. And so that game actually started as a completely different, it was just straight Metroidvania.
Yeah.
And Morgan and Dan, we took them our demo. They put us in touch with a publisher broker, which was someone who worked at massive games companies. And then he would look at your game and go, this is the publisher I think I could sell it to.
Yeah.
And he looked at it and he said, it's adorable. I love it. I love the art style. I cannot sell it. There are too many of this game. This game exists 500-fold.
Yeah.
There's nothing unique enough about it to sell.
Yeah.
And at that point we either scrapped 6 months work. I think it was, maybe it was 4. Maybe it was about 4 months work.
Or you double down.
Or we pivot.
Yeah.
And so Damsel ended up being an action arcade platformer. We went back to the games that really
But it's amazing
inspired
that you
us.
managed to pivot. I think if I were to try and make a game now, like what I intend to do actually, guys, is I intend to use like Twitch. I want to build games with this community. I want to make sure that the things I'm making are engaging to the people who are following along. Like bring new people into the ecosystem too, and get their feedback. Like, hello, Kiro, welcome to the chat. Like, this is exactly why I think for me, I'm going to validate my ideas against the market before I commit more money and like hard-earned money to building a thing. But did you do any of that before going into Damsel? No?
No.
Where did the idea come from?
Okay. So back to being a young woman in the industry.
Yeah, which is like a pretty exceptional thing. Not only to be a young woman in the industry, but to be a studio founder in the industry.
Pretty rare. It's funny because at the very beginning of games, it wasn't rare.
Yeah.
There was actually quite a large percentage when you
Yeah.
look at Roberta.
Right.
Like there was quite a few females, but then my time in the industry.
Who's Roberta for the audience and for me actually? I'm gonna go look this up afterwards.
Okay. Oh, I feel really bad right now. I've forgotten. So I think it was King's Quest.
Yeah.
So those games, she was one of the lead designers
Okay.
on,
Yeah.
one of the creators.
Okay.
But like the Women in Games initiative started about 2 years after I joined the industry.
Yeah. Okay.
And then the first time I got put on a Women in Games panel, Gamergate had just happened.
Right.
So it was a thing. The panel was stressful and it was aggressive, and it probably wasn't as much when I look back at it, but I didn't necessarily want to be a voice for everyone. I felt uncomfortable about it.
This is the Women in Games.
Yeah.
Was this at a PAX?
It was at GCAP actually. It was one of my first GCAPs, and it was great that discussions were being had.
Yeah.
But I don't think one size fits all for anyone.
Yeah.
And Anthony and I walked out of that panel and were like, talking about this doesn't work. Let's make a game that says as much as what we want to say.
Yeah. So
and that
it was
the
about
birth
having
of
it. You had a message that you wanted to get out there.
We
with
just
that.
wanted we wanted.
Did you find your game got pigeonholed as like one of those strong female protagonist games, or?
Oh, this is the fun part about taking 4.5 years to make a game.
Yeah.
As you said, it blows out so much more than you. It's a 8-hour game.
Yeah.
And it took 4.5 years full time to make.
The thing about like scoping games is like they'll take longer than you think they will. Yes. Even when you know that they'll take longer than you think that they will. And so you'll scope down and it'll still be too big. It's
and we scoped down a lot. Like every level was an arcade. We kind of went Commander Keen was one of our big inspirations for the game.
One of the original id games for those youngins here who don't know it. But
play it, pay Keen 4, my favorite game of all time. But our problem was we started out as like strong female protagonist.
Yep.
And ended up the wrong kind of feminism.
Right. The wrong kind of feminism.
Whatever that means in this world.
Okay.
So it was like this journey of getting a lot of press. And we didn't necessarily want press just because it was a female protagonist. We wanted people to go, oh, it's a female protagonist, and then go, oh, this is an awesome, fun game.
Right.
And then it ended up being people not wanting to touch the game.
Yeah.
Because, whatever reasons. It was a very, very interesting ride on, and we did not market well. That is something we have always been aware of. We were not great at marketing. For people who can
It's funny, I think more people in the games industry know about Damsel than people, well, maybe it's just because I'm interacting with a lot of games industry people, but at least in Queensland, Damsel came quite known as a locally produced game.
Yeah.
But did it, like, in that sense, people knew about it, but it
Anthony and I are great at selling ourselves.
Yes.
Terrible at selling games.
Okay.
And it is a skill set that neither of us had.
Yeah.
And also streaming.
Yeah. Didn't exist really at
within
that time,
the last 6 months.
Yeah.
It's all of a sudden became a thing.
Yeah.
So we hadn't planned to figure out how to utilize it.
Yeah, okay.
And we didn't jump in on doing that. And we did have some wonderful streamers as well. Mm-hmm. But streaming was not what it is now as well. And it wasn't used as marketing in the same way.
Yeah.
So we had some fantastic streamers that would play, and quite a lot, but they just, the monetization wasn't
Yeah.
coming across.
Yeah.
And that game has not made its money back.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. Is like a game can make money, but what matters is if it makes more than it cost to build it.
Yeah,
And if it took 4 years to build it, and a big chunk of your inheritance, then
yeah. So we are probably. So Screen Queensland helped us get over the line,
I mean, it did for us too.
and it's
That's actually I've suggested that maybe we might get some people from Screen Queensland onto this same kind of format to discuss a little bit of what they're doing, guys, because what they're doing is absolutely amazing. It's back when THQ and Chrome and Pandemic and all that collapsed and failed, like an uprising happened with mobile games where it wasn't just like the Binary Mill and other companies like that, and Halfbrick jumping in to get on that wave, but they had to do it like that because there wasn't any support from government. Essentially, no government support existed. But that's not entirely true because I mean, in Damsel's case, they managed to get some funding.
Yeah, and we've always had little bits of funding.
Yeah.
Problem in Australia is games are art.
Yeah.
They're seen as the arts.
Yeah.
We get funding, we get like a 20 grand.
Yeah.
And
the Labor government comes in, suddenly
and then
investment
over
in
4
games goes
years, it'll go up a little bit. You
Yep.
might, at the end of 4 years, they might have like 70 grand.
Yeah.
And then a Liberal government will come in.
Yeah.
And at the time, it would get cut.
Yeah.
And so we'd go through this phase of,
Yeah.
that's why Victoria built up so quickly, because they never lost funding.
Yeah.
So
I
they
think
would
a lot
just
of- a lot of
slowly build
people,
up.
Like maybe even people in the chat here don't realize I was very apolitical. I don't know how many of you are Aussies. I know a large proportion of you guys are Americans, where politics is a very important and valuable thing to understand and follow. But in Australia, a lot of people are apolitical.
Yep.
The amazing thing is, I think a lot of game developers and people who care about video games and locally made games, like, yeah, okay, Jess is Australian. Like, I don't know if you know that the way you vote actually affects the number of locally sourced games that get created.
It's starting to finally change because we are now a billion-dollar industry globally. You can't deny anymore, no matter which way you vote, that financially this is a smart bid. How much they'll bid definitely will change, but I don't know whether we'll actually lose all funding again for a while.
But it was incredibly difficult to find funding at the time when you succeeded in doing it.
Yeah.
So how did you manage to do it? Was it
writing grants is an art.
Yeah.
It was. So Anthony and I met in theatre school.
Mm-hmm.
And theatre school, most of the arts is
the arts,
funded
for
by, and it's all funded. So there's literally a class where you learn how to write grant funding.
Wow.
And for that,
so the theatre school education did come in useful. At
it
the
really
end.
did.
Yeah.
There were moments, even just to be able to sell ourselves. I'm not always this gregarious. I turn it on and off. And part of it is,
you speak at a lot of events. You're locally, at least in Queensland, if not Australia, you're definitely a figure in the games industry. So you've managed to, the theatre maybe even helped with that a bit too.
It was, you put your game face on, you get out there. It is unfortunately it's you have to sell yourself when you're running a business, whether you want to or not.
Yeah, you need to develop a personal brand, and it really helps you to do so.
Yeah.
And
it's exhausting, but it's Yet the competitiveness for funding now is insane.
Yeah. So just some guys pointing out that the games industry is bigger than movies, TV, and music combined. Funding locals is a no-brainer. It's absolutely true. And no, while we're here, we should actually look at some of the other chat messages. So Tori is saying this is why artists are very political and try and educate people as much as they can because their livelihoods rely on government grants. Yeah. Unfortunately, I've failed at getting funding 3 times. The competitiveness has shot up so much. Yeah, Screen Australia especially has become very competitive. On Point was successful in getting Screen Queensland funding. When we applied for Screen Australia funding, in the round where we went for it, only 5% of the applicants were successful because of the volume of applicants who went in on it. And I also think that, it also depends on your product very much, right? I think Screen Australia will judge it according to its social value as an arts. They really are an arts, not institution, but they look for the social outcomes. They look at like representation and diversity. There's a lot of there's a lot of stuff that affects whether or not they will fund you.
And I think like the most I can probably say on this one, because I do sit on funding panels, but what I would say is if you're going for funding and it says there are 5 criteria for funding,
Yeah.
if you don't hit find a way to hit all 5, at least acknowledge all 5,
Yeah.
Because it is so competitive.
It's really competitive.
If you've got two great games and you love both, but one of them is hitting all 5 and one of them's only hitting 4, like you can't necessarily in a funding rounds we all know each other. You can't have any nepotism, so you have to just go by the numbers. It's the only way you can do it in the most fair way possible, right? So if you are going for funding, also all of the funding agencies, talk with them before you go. Like chat with them about your product.
That's a really great point. And Jess, you're asking like, what do you think they look for when granting? Excuse me. They look for different things in different projects and in different agencies. And what Meg has said there is actually one of the things that Actuator did. And I would definitely recommend doing this. They do provide some selection criteria, but if you have an idea that you think will work, they're actually really, really friendly people out there.
They want every game to succeed. If they can fund you, they want to.
It's like reach out to like Dakota at Screen Australia or like Finley or Tom. You can actually get a meeting with somebody who is going to be making the final call about your application. And not only will they tell you what they're looking for, but they can help guide they can tell you whether it's worth taking the time and effort to do so at all. And it's a lot of time and effort. For us, it was like, I payroll, like the payroll was 2 weeks of salaries for like 3 people, focusing entirely on producing a grant application.
Yep.
That's tens of thousands of dollars to put together a grant application for a company who's paying wages. And so if you want to fund your own game, it's a lot easier to do so because you're not paying those wages, but at the same time, it's a big undertaking to do it. So taking the time to go and just like speak with them and ask, what do I need to produce in order to be successful in this funding, and like, how can I do this? It really, really helps. And they have great documentation too. Screen Queensland especially, I think of all the agencies, Screen Queensland stands out as one where the funding process is clearer and easier to navigate.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, it is tough. I will always shout their praises because it was what got us over the line.
Yeah, and it's what got us over the line too. We couldn't have made our game without them. I think both of us are in the position of being like incredibly grateful to and
we were lucky enough to have a chunk of money that we just stupidly decided to throw in.
We're both here in Melbourne having this talk, but we both ran our studios in Queensland. And so we're a little bit biased probably in being enamored by the great work that the Screen Queensland people do.
It's definitely the one I know best now. I have sat on the Film Vic board as well.
Yep, there you go.
And the work that they have done, some of the best games.
So your question there, Jess, about what do you think they look for when approving grants is actually, I kind of went and answered it, but Meg is a better person. She's actually sat on the boards of a few.
I think, so the most I will say is look at that criteria.
Yeah.
Hit each criteria point.
Yeah.
I'm sure each agency will have slightly different criteria. Screen Australia and then whatever state you're in. I believe most states now have funding except for, I know South Australia does. I know New South Wales, Victoria. I think NT.
I think Australia is right now one of the best supported, like has some of the best grants for games of any country in the entire world.
Yeah.
And Queensland actually has the best grants within Australia as well. I think recently I think Jed got like $5 million of funding approved to be distributed to. This was a while ago now, maybe like.
I think they have it over a couple of years.
But they're still distributing that money to needy studios like ours to make amazing games. So, So just make sure that I was lucky to be out of the arts industry when COVID hit because all of my artist friends couldn't get coverage from JobKeeper.
Oh, really?
The games industry, like our studio was supported by JobKeeper throughout the entire thing. And I actually think that the games industry went through a boom.
Yeah.
And we should get to talking about this a little bit later, but the industry is now in a bit of a collapse. And I think it's kind of course correcting.
Yeah.
It's course correcting from what happened during COVID.
I think it's a mix of two things. Course correction, 100%. Where everyone was playing games, so studios needed more people to either make more games or support the live games that they had.
Yeah.
But then also we are an art. When the economy goes crap, people buy less games. So we went from people buying all the games to the economy going to a point where people are buying maybe one game. Like what? The Steam 19,400 and something games were released on Steam
Just
in
shy of 20,000
2004.
games last year, and we're on track to exceed that this year.
But only 4% of something of people played games that were released in 2004.
Yeah.
Something like
That's an interesting
96%
stat
of people were playing old games.
Yeah.
So no one was, not necessarily people buying new games either. They were playing their Fallout 4s. They were playing, they were playing games that they played forever. You might still be playing games every day, but it doesn't mean you're buying new games.
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
And because we are lucky enough to be in an industry where people the legacy of a game can last for a long time.
Yeah, it really can.
It doesn't necessarily mean that people are buying games right now because they're trying to. Eggs are like $9 for 6. Like, are you going to buy eggs or are you going to buy a video game? Like, and so I think it's this culmination of both. And then globally, it's just like it's.
So I think we're seeing. We talked about a little bit like the global financial crisis and how that collapsed. We're seeing it happen again, I think, in the games industry.
It's just so much slower, actually, at the moment.
We've
been on the brink of collapse financially, globally.
Some of the really big studios, and I don't want to call them out specifically, but I think a lot of small studios and then medium studios have been closing, and more recently, some of the biggest studios around, I think I love Playside Studios. I think they are they're the closest thing we have to a AAA studio in Australia. They're a AAA
really
studio.
Cool stuff.
They're proper, amazingly high polished game devs. They have some of the most talented people I've ever worked with. They've got people like Jamie Bentley, their studio director up there. I've worked with this guy and I know how amazing he is, right? Yeah. And even studios like that are now suddenly they've gone from 360 staff. I think they had a round of layoffs where they had to cut 70 people, right? And it's interesting because what happened when the GFC happened is all of those really studios with that talent dispersed and a bunch of smaller studios popped up, like Screwtape Studios or, like the Binary Mill that got a big bump out of the fact that, suddenly talent density was possible inside of those small studios. And so I think now with this slow collapse, what do you think will happen to the industry?
I hope we get another ramp up of new indie studios.
Yeah.
It is harder now to go indie than it was that time around.
Yeah.
Because
I was
more
gonna
games.
I was gonna say, well, what do you think of that? Especially with the rise of AI, the speed with which games can be produced and released is increasing dramatically.
I think
the amount of attention that people have for computer games is pretty finite. So
I think we're going to get less Defiant with Hand of Fate. Yeah. They were made a 25 to 30 hour game.
Yeah.
I think we're going to get indie studios popping up, but they're going to be making 10 to 15 hour games. I think it's going to be a shorter experiences, polished, beautiful, AAA indie.
Yeah.
But we can't take as long to make those games at the moment because you need to be able to roll out multiple to have your hit.
Well, that's the thing, I think, is what Actuator is trying to do now is exactly what you're saying. I think you can't go, it's too great a risk to produce any one great work of art. You have to hedge your bets and you have to produce lots of small titles. And so the things which are getting funded now. So when we started creating On Point, there was this instance where Meta was handing out a lot of money to games to create VR titles, right? You could get funded when we started the game. when the game got to maturity and it came to the time when we needed the funding all disappeared. And even now, I think the funding, Meta Horizon Worlds, the things which are performing well are like Fortnite maps, not like whole games. The the stuff that we're seeing happen is this quote snackable content kind of like stuff happening. I think that's the safest play to do now, which is interesting because it means that we're going to lose. Like the only people going to be making great games will be AAA studios, and in some sense, I don't think AAA has they don't have a great track record for creativity. They have spectacle, and sometimes they make incredibly creative things. But across the board, it's like a feature film versus an art house film, right? It doesn't have the same soul.
And I think the bigger the pipeline you're in, the harder it is to pivot. So you just go with what the original design was. And I think sometimes uniqueness comes from going, oh, this didn't work, but oh, what about this?
Yeah.
But it's much harder to do that when you have, 300 mouths to
The
feed,
big stiff-
because the risk of change, they can either make something that they know people will buy, even if it's not amazing, but it's good.
Yeah.
It means that they'll feed the mouths.
A big ship is also really hard to steer.
Yeah.
Like the bigger the organization, the bigger the team, the harder it is to change the direction of what they're doing.
Like I love the fact that I work, because Keywords Australia is quite big right now, which is where I work now. We're a services company. We do a lot of porting and remastering.
Yeah.
I've just got to work on one of my favorite games of all time.
You can tell us about it now, can't you? Many of the games that they do is like, it must be frustrating not be able to talk about the amazing things you're doing, but then suddenly it comes out and now you can say what you've been working on.
And it was Age of Empires 2, but it was Age of Empires 2 for PlayStation 5. And so it was amazing getting to work on an Xbox title that was coming to the PlayStation 5. And it was a journey. It was an engineering masterpiece watching the people that I work with. And it was also this giant behemoth, because when you're adding in a new platform to a live game, there is so much delicacy on that release. And I still remember getting my version of Age of Empires 2 from this is
a game that me and Fasby used to play a lot when we were kids, right? I can't imagine how cool it would be to be digging around in the code for that.
Oh man, we were so poor growing up. So I didn't have the boxed version of Age of Empires 2. In Australia. So there was, in the 90s, you could get it on the Nutrigrain box.
Yeah.
So Kellogg's,
it would have a bunch of game demos on it.
And it was the whole game as well. And it was even Kellogg's branded the disc. And it was on the front. I remember my mum going, if we're going to buy the giant, because you're going to get it on the big box of Nutrigrain. Yeah. And I was like, I will eat it all, I promise. So I ate stale Nutrigrain for 3 weeks. So I was like, no, look, I'm still eating it. It was a good idea. And so that game was one of the few games I had that wasn't pirated or on a random disc.
I mean, when you're a kid, how else are you going to get your games? Especially if you're from a lower socioeconomic bracket, it's it just happened. I personally actually think that, if you don't have access to it and you've got no other way to do that, it's
you do what you got to do.
You do what you got to do when you're a kid. A lot of people here showing love for Age of Empires. And Ogre, thank you for coming along for the first time chat and dropping a message in here. There's a huge amount of red tape inside of AAA. And Tori, you're right. Playside Studios is, I got such respect for what they're able to do and the scale at which they're able to do it. Australia needs more studios like Playside. Hello.
That will work.
Yeah, we lost
Are
we lost
back?
power on our microphone, but we're back, guys.
But I wonder if we can I'll connect that to a charger too. Hold on.
Thank you for letting us know, guys.
Thank you.
It is your one.
It's mine?
Yeah, that's why it's red.
Ah.
Well, it's working for the moment.
On the fly tech support.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I warned you guys
You
it'll
tell
be.
the people who've done this before.
Well, actually, I haven't had it run out, so this is weekly.
Oh.
Well, it did just come off the back of FastV's cooking stream,
Oh,
so that
and
explains
you were
why.
using her. There we go.
Louder, I'm deaf. Tech support FastV to save the day.
Have a charger port on the mic?
I don't think so. I think it needs that docking thing. Oh no.
Woohoo!
All right, we're good, guys. FastV's coming into. It's a good time for an intermission. Come get some snacks. I hope they have ices. Yeah.
Hey,
Great.
nice.
Do you want a black cable or you
No, that's fine. It's okay, guys. We don't need super high production quality here. This is our test. This is our test one, guys. Things are allowed to go wrong.
I will quickly say on this note,
Yeah.
like the games industry news right now is very much like, ugh, this company makes so much money. How could they lay off people?
Yeah.
And I'd really like
What
to
the
say
hell?
that yes, okay, it never doesn't necessarily make sense from the outside as we're not seeing financials, but games cost
Thank
a
you,
lot of
Vasco.
money. It takes a lot of time, and no one ever lets go of people without caring.
Yeah.
Like,
Letting go of people was the hardest thing I had to do in my entire life. And it teaches you a lot about people when like you learn the quality of the character of the people that you're working with when
it teaches you a lot about
suddenly
yourself
the
as
money
well.
that you learn a lot about yourself, you learn a lot about so Screwtape Studios isn't actually technically you had to let some people go, but you never had to close the studio, did you?
No, technically
I
it's
mean,
still running in the
this
background.
is a good tangent to like what happened at the end of Screwtape because we talked about when it started. We talked about
Yeah,
Damsel.
post Damsel. What happens when you throw $500,000 at something and it makes 20 grand?
Yeah.
Like, that's probably not 100% the numbers, but
No,
it's
but
pretty
it's
close.
like it's a very similar experience with OnPoint. Like I now know I need to like OnPoint wouldn't have like Actuator wouldn't have survived OnPoint if we didn't have diversification.
Yeah.
Right now, what we're doing is we're working with drones. We're doing drone simulation. We're doing drone automation. Before that, we got revenue from mining. That's where we got the money in the first place to make the games happen. And so, like, we have survived it like that. Like, what happened in your case?
So we started outsourcing everything we could. I outsourced my QA skills. I worked during the so this would have been during the pandemic.
Yeah.
I was working for some companies in Melbourne that ended up not releasing the games. And then my business partner, Anthony, so we had a team Disparity up here. They're a Gold Coast team. And they made a game called Ninja Pizza Girl with their family, and it's amazing. I love
that one's
game.
an amazing game. You guys
play
should look
that
it up.
game.
Like the family made the game. I mean, like the teenage daughter.
Yeah,
did some of the art,
the
art for it, and like the dad, the programming, and
then mum is also an artist, and I knew them from Chrome, and they started porting indie games. And so Anthony was outsourcing to them.
Yeah.
So that's how we got into porting, and then Disparity decided they were like, look, we want to get out of the porting. They wanted to go back into original IP and work on their own stuff again. And so we sort of inherited the porting business. We released Damsel on all platforms.
Yeah, which is a massive achievement for an indie studio.
It really
releasing
is.
Their first game,
and
their
it was
first big game.
And it was when we learned all the stuff about the stores.
Yeah.
Like it's not just all of the rules that you need to do. Then there's all the rules surrounding the stores and what languages that you have to have your marketing text if you want to release in certain countries. And so
like how your buttons look and whether you have a quit button and where it exists. And it's like
or then you are not allowed to have a quit button on some platforms. And so
and then having one code base trying to cater to all those different cases. It's a lot.
It is. It is, especially because it was PlayStation, Xbox, Switch, PC.
Yeah.
And then on PC it was Mac, Linux,
Yeah.
and Windows. And so we started porting games. We did Void Busters, which was one of the first big ones that we did. Anthony did a beautiful little indie game over in Europe called Stillness of the Wind. And so often when he was getting a contract to port a game, if I didn't have work, I would just be testing still.
Yeah.
Even if I wasn't being contracted, I'd be testing, I'd be learning, I'd be certification testing, and we were getting this process. It was just the two of us at this point. We had no one else on the team. We got this process over, it was probably, he probably did about 14 games all up on various SKUs. Some games it was all SKUs, some games it was one or two.
Yeah.
And then the two of us together, we worked on, I did a lot of QA, and then I did the QA certification testing for Void Bastards.
Yeah.
Which did really well. I love that game. It was X2K International, Australia's studio head, founded a company, and there was a few people, especially their artists there, who I'd worked with at Chrome as well. And then the last year and a half, there was another game we were working on. I won't say who they were. They were an adorable team. They were very sweet, but it was their first game. We underquoted, and their timeline blew out.
Right.
And so we couldn't
That's a hard thing to do.
justifiably go along for the ride with them.
Was there a contractual dispute or anything that arose from it?
So we had we hit a milestone.
Yeah.
We said, look, we actually cut off the contract and said, look, if we do this now, you will be able to find somebody else. It won't be too far gone.
Yeah.
And we won't lose.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're not going to ask for you to pay out the contract. We've just, the last milestone we hit.
Yeah.
We'll move from there. We'll part ways. And then we got a chance to work on two of the most adorable, amazing, like wonderful games. Like it was a joyous 2 years as COVID was ending. Of working on.
I don't think a lot of people would describe
COVID
as joyous years.
And I look back now, and I was stressed as hell, and I was probably wasn't the worst. But I got to every day. I got to be working on Webbed, which
Webbed is such a success story at the Queensland.
And it's such a beautiful game. Go buy it, play it. It is
you know what? While you talk about it, I'll bring the trailer up.
It is just this whimsical, beautiful pixel art. You're a spider. You're encountering bugs around the Australian bush and on this journey of collection, and it's done so well. And so that was one of the first games that I did full release management for outside of Damsel. So we contracted out everything we possibly could.
So let's just quickly run that trailer.
Oh, so getting to play that every day. The music, as soon as I could hear it, it just kicked in all the joy of, and they were a small local team in Brisbane.
Yep.
So we met them at an industry event and we're chatting, and we'd go out and sell ourselves and our porting. And we had a few really wonderful advocates for our work. And then at the same time that we were getting that on all platforms. So we obviously didn't make the game, right? That was the team, the design.
Who were some of the people involved with this? I think I've met some of them.
S-Bug Games is the game, and this was their first game as well. And they are just a wonderful team. I think they've either just released or they've just announced the next game that they're working on, Isopod.
Okay.
And so they
Yes, yeah. That one
Yeah.
I've seen. That one's 3D. You play a millipede or a centipede
Yes, yeah.
or something like that. It's like really, really looking quite polished. I can't wait for that to come out.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
then at the same time we did that, we were lucky enough to also get to port Unpacking.
Yes. Well, okay. So Tim and Ren are good friends of mine, and I'm in awe of what these guys were able to do. I managed to meet Tim like at a Unity developer meetup when he was announcing Assault Android Cactus
Oh my
for
god,
the
yeah.
first time. So he's a ex-Sega,
He's also
ex-Sega animator.
ex-pandemic.
Yeah, but
That's
like
how I met him.
he was an animator who decided he was going to try and just make games, and then just oh my god. And he's got a game he's cooking up behind the scenes with the best character animation for a platformer I've seen on anything, anywhere by far. And I don't say that lightly. So these are really talented people. But to get to work on, I don't know if you guys know about Unpacking. I mean, we could run another trailer quickly, but Unpacking is another really amazing local success where
It won a BAFTA.
it won a
Like,
BAFTA award.
it was, and so I knew Tim from
Talk about that while I bring it up.
Pandemic, and I met Ren a few years later, and I met them both separately before they started dating. And they went off to, there's a wonderful place called Stugan, which does an intensive stay in a cabin in Sweden or Switzerland, wherever Stugan is, because it's a country, it's a city. And it's like a games incubator. And this game came out of that, and just, I was lucky enough for Ren to show me some of the early build and work on this. And then a few months later, when they came to us to port it to, we did PlayStation 4, Xbox, and it was our first PlayStation 5 title, which it's quite different from doing a PlayStation 4. It's got the most changes of all of the generations so far.
I think Tim and Ren are usually pretty like private people. I don't know if I'd ever get Tim to come on to talk about something like this, but I think his story would be so fascinating.
It would be so interesting because he's also a South Australia developer. And was at Ratbag. So I think he'd be a very, very fascinating person to talk to about it. But if you don't know Unpacking, this was the other gloriously amazing game that I got to be playing.
I got to work with
daily.
Ella, who did the sound for On Point, actually did some of the sound for Unpacking, but mostly her father, Jeff Van Dyke, is an incredibly talented sound designer.
Yeah, also a BAFTA winner.
Also a BAFTA winner. There's a lot of people, guys. I think you're probably seeing a theme here. There's a lot of really cool stories to be told, and I really want to do that. Like, I think hopefully Meg will be the start of this. We can have some of these other people if they're interested.
They should get to tell their own stories,
they should
right?
tell their,
I don't want to.
We don't want to do it for them, but like down the line, my hope is that we might have the chance to interview some of those people about those games as well. But here, let's just run Unpacking for those who don't know it. Yeah, so that's Unpacking. I skipped it there, guys, but I think you get the idea of it. But this is like, this is maybe a game which is more along the lines of that snackable content idea where you look at it and you instantly get it. You understand the game. So this game succeeded from a viral Twitter post, didn't it?
Yep, they did a GIF of a box unpacking and taking things out, and it took off, and it was just, it never, like, the amount of work that they did to keep that momentum going is
Yes.
undeniable. Like,
Yeah.
I can sit here and go, and it just never stopped. Everyone loved it. But no, they did
Yeah.
so much work to build that momentum, keep it running while also building the game.
I think one of the most interesting parts of that story, which I would like to hear, is how, like, they did all that work, and I think all of this happened after they signed a publisher. And so they had a game which was like inherently viral, signed a publisher, and then it succeeded without it would have succeeded without the publisher's contribution.
Yeah.
I'd be so interested to hear about that trade-off, because sometimes, like, you with a publisher, it's like you do or you don't. Like, do we self-publish or do we get a publisher? And Humble is obviously one of the biggest, like, ever since the Humble Bundle was one of the biggest
Publishers of indie games
at the time. And it's like, even with that kind of even with a successful game, having the involvement of a publisher, like, whether it's worth it or not, is a really, really interesting question.
That'd be fascinating to know, actually, from their point of view.
And I don't even know how much they can talk about that. They may not be able to talk about that at all, but I do think it would make for a really, really cool, like, subject of an interesting conversation. But,
yeah.
But
yeah, so
bit of a
ported
tangent
those.
there. Yeah.
In the middle of porting those, while we were about to expand our porting business, we got contacted by my new boss.
Yep.
Kendra.
This is Kendra.
Yeah.
So she's the studio director of
Tantalus North.
Tantalus North. Yeah.
And she was pretty much letting us know that she was about to start a boarding business in Brisbane, and sorry, but I'm doing this, and I hope that doesn't mess with your stuff.
Yeah.
And by the end of the conversation, I think we all walked away.
That's a pretty decent thing to do, honestly. Like,
we had a mutual friend.
Yeah.
A mutual friend, Ollie, who was like, you really should let them know.
Yeah.
And so she did. And then I think we all walked away going, oh no, I think we're about to all work together.
Yeah, that's an amazing outcome.
Within about I think a month, we then met with the then CEO of Keywords Australia, and it was pretty quick. We didn't have.
So it was closest to an acqui-hire.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So you weren't technically acquired.
No.
But all of the staff of the business and its resources, presumably, were hired up into the new business.
Yeah. All of our knowledge importing, all of our knowledge in the quick processes that we'd brought along with us was what we sort of took to our new studio.
Yeah.
And the day the PS5 version of Unpacking, which was our last port.
What a game
passed
to end on.
cert on the Friday.
Yeah.
And our first day at Tantalus North was the
what
Monday.
A time. Wow.
We didn't have a break, and it was. And then my world changed intensely, because I went from, tens of thousands of dollar contracts to $1 million contracts.
Yeah.
And that was when I learned and that was when I started my journey on learning how to deal with my stress and how much pressure I put on myself.
It seems like that in life, isn't it? It's like in high school, you feel like assignments are really important and stressful, and then you get like QCS or HSC or whatever it is now, and it's like that's the most important thing, and then university comes along, and you think your assignment's the most important thing in the world, and then you get a job
at university, so there was nothing important. I was being a cat. I was being given an animal and then coming to uni as an animal for a day. Like,
but in life, it seems to like constantly escalate. But I feel as though operating a studio, like, is the peak of that stress.
Because you don't get to turn off ever.
Is it easier when you go to something like Tantalus and you've got to...
I am personally really liking it, because I was running all of the financials because Anthony was an engineer and designer. So the bulk of the work, especially when there's only two of us, the production side of it was minimal. It was still you got to keep someone on track. And I was doing QA and I was doing the certification side. But the bulk of the actual development work was him. So I was running the business. I was doing the financials.
Yeah.
And we had finally started making enough money to live off. My bank account for the first time in like 6 years was no longer going down.
Yeah.
And the pressure, you don't get to switch off.
Yeah.
There is
Financial pressure.
If you're not at work, you're thinking about work.
Yeah.
You're doing the next thing.
Yeah.
And so for the first time in 16 years,
you got to
I can
take
even
a break
think
and
about
breathe.
having what does the outside of my life look like?
You
Well,
can have some balance. You can-
yeah. And I'm not very good at it yet,
Mm.
but that's because I was ingrained in me. I also really like my job. I like doing my job well.
I think this is something that me and Fastfee also struggle with, is like when you know, there's that old adage that says if you find a job that you love, you never have to work again for the rest of your life. But on the
I think
flip
that's
side of
bullshit.
that, it is a little bit
Work
bullshit,
is still work. You just like it more.
because then everything you do becomes your job. It's
Wow.
like Fastfee, she's cooking dinner. Like you guys, you all got tricked.
Yeah.
You thought it was content. She was cooking dinner, but the truth is, it's also content.
Yeah.
Everything you do is content when you're a creator like Fastfee, and like when your life becomes about computer games. When you're playing games, you're probably thinking about the creative process. Whenever
How
you're
would I-
not doing something, you're interacting with people, when you're seeing them release their games, you're thinking like, how does this affect my game?
And then you're like, if I've got energy to go out twice this week, but there's
Yeah.
a game dev event on, one of those things that I'm going to take
gonna be the
energy
game
is
dev
going to be the
event,
game
yeah.
dev event.
Yeah.
And that event is about selling
Yep.
yourself, making sure you're talking to
Yep.
enough people.
Which is what you don't have when you're an employee, if you have your own business. But in some sense, it sounds like, for you at least, having gone through the journey of like taking your inheritance and building a game that you loved, even though this isn't the dream game necessarily, it's gives you a little bit more peace now that you've got all that skills and expertise, you've got all that history behind you, to be able to step into a role where you're properly compensated but don't have that same stress and pressure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I do not regret. So for me, because I never finished a degree.
Yeah.
So for me, spending that money was like
Yeah.
paying for a degree.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't be where I am right now
Yeah.
if we hadn't made Damsel.
It sounds as though it was a lot more than, like, my student debt was like $50,000 or something
Yeah,
like that.
it was a lot more. I paid
Yeah.
for like a couple of med degrees and a
Yeah.
PhD, and
Yeah.
but if I hadn't done that, I
Yeah.
wouldn't be where I am right now, and I also wouldn't have been able to specialize.
Yeah.
Like I'm lucky that I get to choose a niche, make myself.
Yeah.
Whether that's because this industry is not stable, whether you're working for yourself or whether you're working for somebody
right.
else.
Yeah.
Like, and the more you make yourself invaluable, the longer you'll get to hold on. Hopefully,
Yeah.
if God forbid things didn't go well. Although our studio system, the work for hire system, when people lay off at
Yeah.
other companies, they outsource more. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, and I wouldn't have. I think if I continue, we've talked about this before. When
Mhm.
you're working for yourself, it is really hard to gauge where you are compared to other people.
Yeah.
You can be really good in your own company, but
Yep.
going into another studio with people who'd been like, I don't know, they were a senior producer somewhere, and
Yeah.
I'm coming in and they're like, what
I
are
have
you? Are
very
you
little
QA or are
context
you
for
not?
how I would measure up against like a technical director at another studio. You know, I don't really know.
Yeah, and you,
Yeah.
like, you don't get to know,
Yeah.
right? Until you either, I don't know, go and do it,
Yeah.
or so that's been a really interesting journey, because I was very much seen as, even though I was never hired as QA,
Yeah.
I was very much seen as always being sort of QA adjacent.
Yeah.
And I've realized that I think I'm doing a lot more. Like release management at most other studios has
Yeah.
got nothing to do with QA.
Mhm.
It's got nothing to do with the certification process.
Yeah. But I think what you've almost done is innovated a new role into existence by combining the release of a game with the quality assurance process, right?
Because to me,
That's
it just
your
makes
innovation.
sense, because that's
what
how I did it.
That's what and thank you very much for pinning that, by the way, Goldie.
Yes.
I encourage you
Aw.
guys to go have a look at that talk
Oh,
if you're interested in QA, or even if you just want to understand QA better.
if you can listen to my voice for this long, then it won't be bad.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel I'm hoping I am, because that's how I did it when we were doing it for ourselves. I would
Yeah.
produce the game by playing it every day.
Yeah.
Like that's why for me, nothing is signed off until it's in the game and playable,
Yeah.
because the pipeline, like you can't sell your computer to somebody.
Yeah.
Just because the old
a
adage
finite
works on
number
my
of-
machine. It's like,
Yeah.
well, good for you,
Yeah.
but if it doesn't work in the build,
That's
it
it.
doesn't technically work.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's been really interesting. And I feel like I've gained an amount of respect now
Yeah.
within the whole company.
Well, actually, within the whole industry, I think you've fallen into a position where often you're asked to speak, you're asked to attend events. The Game Jam, if you guys caught the Game Jam that I
Would've.
participated in, like Meg was one of the judges for the Game Jam. You've moved into a bit of a position of like mentorship now for a lot of people too. And, you know, although you wound up on that panel and probably the way that women in games and the Gamergate thing went doesn't really represent the right kind of feminism in your mind, I do think I think representation of women in the games industry is getting better. I personally, my you know, one of my best friends, his daughter wants to be a game creator. She wants to create computer games.
Yay!
Well, maybe I can just. What advice would you have for women wanting to enter the industry? Because you also get to work with Kendra, who's at the top of a studio and a big one, no less.
Yep, she's
like,
the first female studio head I've ever worked with. And I also get to work with Anna, who is the first studio technical director, who's been a female I ever get to work with as well.
Do you have any advice? Because I think more women in games would be really a powerful and valuable thing. Do you have any advice for if I was, hey Isla, go look at this.
Oh my God,
her name's Isla. And so what's your advice for Isla?
Two things. Don't read the news about women in games, because you'll only ever hear the bad things, the scary things. I think a lot of people, you read the negative things that do occur, have occurred, will continue to occur because we're not fixing the world.
Yeah.
That doesn't exist. You know, the world's slowly getting better. We're in the best place in humanity that we've been in a long time. Don't let that scare you off.
Yeah. It's like if you fixate on Trump being president, you'll think the world's going to hell, but
there are so many amazing things happening. Yeah, right. Like there is so much positive. There are so many studios with women in leadership. There are also some of my greatest mentors were men. Yeah. There are you will always find your advocates. You've just got to do it. Yeah. If it's what you want to do, don't let that scare you. Yeah. That's the first hurdle, is not letting it scare you and ignoring all the noise and just jumping in. Yep. And then the advice for her is the advice that I would give the Trump word.
Right. The T word.
But the advice I'd give her is the advice I would then give anyone.
Yeah.
For me, uni is an interesting thing.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think uni is necessary to be in the games industry.
Yeah, I actually don't also. The most valuable thing that I got out of university was the games project. It was meeting the amazing people that I get to work with. Yep. And it was having a portfolio piece that I could bring to a studio and say, look what I can make.
Yep. And I think you can do the two most valuable things in two other ways. Especially if you want to be an engineer, and so design isn't your thing, go remake Space Invaders. Go remake an arcade game. Yeah. Learn how to making something, finishing it. Yeah. If designing something is not your specialty, learning how to make it. If designing something is what you want to do, go remake it. Yeah. Learn the design of some of the greatest games. Yeah. You don't necessarily need to make something new as a portfolio piece to show you can make something. Yeah.
I think this is just good advice in general.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And then also the learning, the meeting people. Yep. Game dev events. There are quite a lot of ways that you can still meet people. Yep. And I feel like, especially for design, especially for art, make your art. You don't need someone to give you permission to make your art, which I think university does give you permission to make your art. But also,
it sets you objectives. It you prove that you can show up consistently. That's a big part of it. And it gives you assignments that it says, go do this thing.
Yeah. But as I said, I did not go to uni for games. Yeah. There are lots of other jobs within the industry as well. And the other thing that I think uni does give someone a mentality of, so if you're going to go to uni and you want to study games design or games art or games engineering, know that it's when you get your degree, that's not it.
Yeah, it's the start.
It's the start. And I think sometimes we get this idea that I'm going to be taught everything I need to know. Yeah. And as you said, it's the start. Yep. The games industry is going to change so much within your career. If you,
So, I mean, this is a good segue to a question that I wanted to ask: is where do you think the games industry is going to go from here, in Australia especially?
I think we probably got another rough 6 months.
Yeah, just 6 months.
At least, at
It's
least,
a
at
slow
least. I've been
train
saying
crash,
6 months
so
for a while. Like,
mm,
it could possibly still be a tentative 3 years.
mm,
Like, I think we are going to see more groups of indies again pop
yeah,
up, especially as we have had some larger amounts of layoffs at some very big, great
yeah,
companies. Those people know each other, they know how to work together. I can see there's probably already groups of 5 to 10 people
yeah.
from some of these companies working on something themselves right now.
Just look at what Screen Queensland is doing with its what's the name of the program it
The
has there?
residency?
The residency.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. I think we will
For
hit another
anybody
indie
who's
boom.
interested in building games in Australia, the Screen Queensland has a residency program where they'll like bring you into they'll give you a stipend. It's not really enough to live on, but it's enough to like, buy a little bit of food and party or rent, and they'll give you a space where you can work with a bunch of other aspiring indie developers to create games together.
Yep.
And they almost give you assignments in the same way that university would too, I think, right?
Yeah, I think it's a great way of, if you're a learn by doing
Yeah.
kind of person.
Yeah.
Which I am.
So you would say you think the industry is going to fracture like it did after the
Yeah.
GFC, and there'll be lots of smaller.
And it will fracture completely differently. I think once again we're going to probably have smaller games
Yeah.
being successful
Yeah.
rather than the size
Would you ever
of
go
games.
back to that? Because you were saying how you like now being at a studio of a large scale. You like the AAA experience. You value the stability and the steady pay.
Right
You are one of
now,
the rare people who has had the experience of running your own studio. If it did continue to fracture, do you think you'd ever go back to it because you have that under your wing, or?
I'm going to not in the next 5 years.
Mm.
Not unless everything went to hell.
Mm.
I've always got the backup right now. But never say never,
Yeah,
right?
that's
Like
right.
I've
Maybe
learned
if the right project came along.
and I've learned so much watching how a big company runs that
Yeah.
maybe I could take that and
Yeah.
run my own company better next time.
Yeah. So like, what are your goals if you move forward in your career from here? What do you want to do? You're going to continue to talk and engage with the community, or do you
Yeah.
think you'll focus more on?
So
Sorry,
this year, I've applied to hopefully go over to New Zealand GDC and
Cool.
do the same talk that I did. I'll hopefully find out whether that happens. I'd love to do an internet. It terrifies me.
Yeah.
Like I spent 7
Terrified
months.
right now with the.
Oh, I'm finally doing better right now.
Yeah, good.
But like that talk, I spent 7 months
Yeah.
working on it.
Yeah.
And then I also presented it internally
Yeah.
within the company. And then I've also applied to do another new talk. I'll probably still keep talking about QA and
Yeah.
then release management a little
Well,
bit.
I think you have a
I want
powerful
to
message now.
and I want to advocate for
Yeah.
for a part of the industry that doesn't. It has a few major advocates.
Yeah.
But in Australia in particular, when the GFC hit, we had, 100 QA
Yeah.
through all the studios.
Mhm.
And we lost all of that experiential
Yeah.
talent. And so we've been building back up for years.
Yeah.
Um,
So your
and then
personal
I'd
goals
love
are to
to-
continue to innovate and be at the forefront of quality assurance.
yeah, and then I would love to do that, if you'll let me at Keywords. I have grand ideas on building a team of release managers and QA
Yeah, cool.
that could go around projects
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and use that
We
the
have
double-handed side of it.
We have a very strong QA muscle inside of Actuator, and I think it's like, I think I even spoke with you about an opportunity where we might outsource QA to.
Yeah.
So I think like the way that you approach it is pretty unique though, in that you begin the QA at the beginning of the process, that you connect it to release management, and they aren't like the release of the game and the process where the person clicks the go live button is really like connected to a process that starts with quality assurance.
Yeah.
I think what you're doing there is pretty cool. So I'd love to see how that continues.
Yeah, which means I've got to
It means you've got to keep doing talks about it. You've got
and
to
it
keep
also means I've got to
innovating.
focus my damn brain to be
That's
able to
right.
build those procedures, because it's a whole lot of stuff that comes from experiential stuff for me
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah.
Oh, I would actually love to do a talk at South by Southwest.
So let's go back to some of the questions, because we're coming up to the end of the end of my list of questions, guys, and so that means it's now your turn to ask some questions. So we've got some catching up. I can see we've got our unpacking trailer. So we've got Spirit of Tory asking, thinking, what do you think that a similar thing in regards to Massive Monster, Devolver, and Cult of the Lamb?
Oh, I wish I knew the context of what I was rambling about.
Yeah, I'm so sorry, but I did actually get the chance to. I was at PAX the year that Cult of the Lamb like announced, and that same year they won the game award, and their PAX booth was awesome. And I like spoke with the guys at their booth, and then I went for drinks with them, and like got to see them where they were in that moment where it was like, holy crap, we have a hit on our hands, and suddenly like things were going to blow up. And they actually gave us the introduction to Devolver Digital for On Point as a potential publisher. Yeah, and it was such an incredibly strong introduction. If it wasn't for the fact that Devolver stopped or was uninterested in publishing VR games, we might have had a connection through that. So it's like, these are other guys I would actually love to speak to about their experience, just the experience of having a game that was an instant success in that way. Of would it like, we could have that conversation with Tim and Ren about unpacking, but I think Cult of the Lamb did it in a different way, where it
really
was like,
did.
They really like had a launch. They timed it with PAX, where usually like common advice will be try and launch your game in a way where you're not competing with every other title. And they
went straight head forward with all of it.
Yeah, they just like smashed into the scene. So those guys would be super interesting people to speak with.
It's actually quite interesting because I was just, for anyone not in Australia, in Melbourne we have I think it's called ACME, so I think it's the Academy of Moving Image.
Right.
And so it's a museum for film and games in Australia.
Yeah.
And they have an exhibit that's all year round, and it's the history of moving image in Australia. Right. And it starts out like, pictographs, and there's a whole Cuphead exhibit. Yeah, and it's cool. Like, it's just spinning, and then there's flashing lights, and it shows it animating, and it shows how moving image has evolved. And then at the very end of the exhibit, well, almost at the end of the exhibit, is a Australian video games section.
That's amazing.
And so there's Untitled Goose Game, there's Push Me, Pull You, and then there's Unpacking, there's Webbed, there's Cult of the Lamb.
To be a person who's worked on such a large proportion of successful local games, that's a pretty cool.
I love the fact that I have been able to be just a small part in helping that success.
Yeah.
Like, it is watching somebody jumping over a fence and getting to be one of the people just doing this in the corner. Like, it's especially like there's so much love and joy in this industry. And as you said, like, somebody like the Cult of the Lamb, they would no one holds their publishers too tight. No one won't share what the success that they've had. Mm-hmm. And I think the Australian games industry, I don't know about other local industries in other countries, but the Australian games industry feels so supportive of each other. Yeah. And kind of rising tide, all ships. We want to like
all the boats. That's
yeah. And it's been kind of wonderful to see so many games over the last 18 years.
There's an interesting question here from Jess. Like, what's it like being introverted and managing a studio? How would an introvert do that? I'd say you're somewhere in between. I think privately you're introverted, but publicly you present yourself as an extrovert. Would that be a fair thing?
Yeah, I think I gain energy from
social interaction.
From social interaction.
I'd say that makes you an extrovert.
But it also intensely drains me.
Yeah.
Like, I don't do well working from home for too many days in a row. Yeah. I need to get back into the office and see people. Yeah. But it's been this really weird journey. And I think as an introvert, you have the amazing internet. Yeah. There are other ways to get yourself out there. Yeah. But also, like I said earlier, even when I go to an event, my game face goes on. There's a persona. Yeah. You can play a role. It as much as it needs to be, much as there is people still want authenticity.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily have to be 100% you
Mhm.
in that moment. It can
Yeah.
be 90% you.
Yeah.
You can, yeah. It's, I think managing the studio as well, if you find other people in your life to come along for the journey with you and have people who are more extroverted as well, that will definitely help you, because there is so much role for each type of person as well.
I
And
think
if you,
to speak to the point, Jess, I think that often you can be introverted. The key things that make a studio successful is not necessarily a gregarious leader. It can be a person who has clear vision and communicates it, has conviction, is a careful planner and manager. There are so many things that align themselves with, like, as long as you're passionate about it, there are so many things that introverts do quite well that can make a studio successful. And then to double down on what Meg said is, yeah, you can bring other people in to, like, project managers, operations managers, to do things that require a lot of that, a lot of that interaction with people. And if you learn to delegate, it can be very possible to almost not network at all and just find people to do that on your behalf. If you really find strong advocates, it can go a very long way. At some point, you do need to. I think you can be a lot more successful if you do involve, if you do network, if you do get out there and meet people. If you do things like this is a great opportunity for me to talk with Meg about things like quality assurance. So there's something to be said for that, but it's not necessary. The Binary Mill, that studio, I absolutely love, and we'll talk about a lot. I'd say, in some sense, the director of that studio is the best studio director I've ever seen, but also an introverted person. Have you ever met somebody from the Binary Mill? You've been to all sorts of networking events.
I think,
besides myself,
like maybe a decade ago, maybe
There
at
you
one
go.
thing once,
Yeah.
but I've always known who they were. I've
Yeah.
always known what they do. Their work sort of speaks for them
Yeah.
as well.
and that's the point, is sometimes your work speaks for you, and if you just do great work, you don't need to be out there being really high energy and socializing a lot.
Because this can also be a lot for people. Like,
Oh,
you
yeah.
can be too extroverted, and I had to find my balance. I was a whirlwind who'd go in and you don't remember anyone's names,
Yeah.
and so you'd meet someone again and you'd feel like an asshole because you're
Yeah.
like, I spent 30 minutes talking to you last event and I have no
Absolutely.
idea who you were. And
Yeah.
I had to find my balance of.
And there are lots of great developers that will never come onto our stream to discuss game development, because they're just not, like, the idea of talking in front of 80 people, like, makes them lose sleep at night. And so, but they are also, that doesn't mean they're any less great of a game developer for that reason. And many of them are in leadership positions too.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Goldie's asking, ever since I got into game dev, I see them differently and try and break down how their mechanics are working.
Or
Referring
playing
to
games. I
and-
find playing games so hard now. I actually, because I was a games tester for so long, I actually
Yeah.
didn't play games for years because
Yeah.
I'd either break them.
Yeah.
Like the amount of games that I have accidentally
You just
broken
can't
and
break
just
the pattern
gone.
of testing games.
Oh, half the time
Yeah.
I don't even know I'm
Yeah.
doing it.
Fastfee, I think you guys know she's really good at finding bugs in games, and that probably comes from the fact that she spent so much time doing that
Yeah.
when she was younger. It was her job, right? And it sticks with you, absolutely. It changes the way you experience games to be a part of the creative process in them.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
It is definitely, it's a risk of joining the industry.
Yeah, yep. Remaking a game, you learn so much that you don't get stuck with creative ideas.
Yep.
Yeah.
You don't have that that questioning. You don't get stuck on the should I try this or should I try that?
Yeah.
And so often you never finish a game. I watch some of my most creative friends never actually finish a project because they get stuck on those ideas. Whereas, yeah, especially at the very beginning of your career, remake the things that have already been made or find one thing to tweak in that game. Find one thing that you can bring that's new to it, but then you only have one element that you're actually trying to find the fun in, because making games is so hard.
There's recently a project, I'm trying to find it. Yeah, here it is.
A few weeks ago, Pokemon Omega
cool is
Ruby
this
and
one,
Alpha
guys?
Sapphire turned 10 years old. I know, I went 3D. So I thought
So
today,
here's a
as
great
part of
example. This is
Munchmas, we
Unreal
could
Engine
switch things
5.
up and react to
Somebody's
the
just
footage that's
taken
been released of this
Unreal
project
Engine
so
5
far.
and decided,
Since there's no
okay,
demo of
I'm
it
just
released
gonna
yet, but from what I've seen, it
Pokemon
looks very
with, like,
promising.
super
So
high
if you guys
detailed
are
graphics
excited,
in
don't
it.
forget to
The
leave a
ultimate,
like.
like,
And if
underlying
you've been
design of
enjoying
this
the
is still
Munchmas
just-
Marathon so
still
far,
just, you know, it's still just Pokemon Sapphire, and it's a great idea to have done it like that, because you don't have to do any of the design. Design's there. If you want it as an exercise in learning, yeah, it's a really good thing. I've discussed this with Cody Phillips, another person I'd love to have on to talk sometime. He's the head of the games degree at Queensland University of Technology. He runs the Bachelor of Games in Interactive Entertainment. I've suggested to him, you know, like, as a part of the course, one exercise that may be really, really good is let the students pick a game that they like, and without doing any design, have them like re-implement it for the engineering students, especially. It's like the engineers and the artists, it's like, remove the ambiguity, just say, this is the exact template. Go and see if you can recreate it. You can never sell it, you can never make any money from it, but you'll learn a lot along the way from doing that. So we've got Goldie saying, never expect to be handed a job straight out of uni because it won't happen. I co-founded my studio and gave myself a job. And now is maybe the best time, like, it's a good time to do that. I think what Meg was saying, I definitely agree with. The landscape of the industry, if you can't find a job, it may not be the worst time to try and just create your own job yourself, especially if you're going and making small experiences. Small snackable experiences are the thing that can really be a powerful, like, cheap and easy way to test whether you can do the thing that you can do and to break into the industry right now.
One thing I wish I had done was do like a diploma in business.
Yeah,
I
for sure.
ran a business without having any business knowledge, and that was really hard. We
Me
learned the
too.
mistakes that I made were costly.
Yeah.
When someone could have easily told me in just a 1-year diploma while we were making games before there was any kind of success.
On one hand, I agree with you, but on the other hand, I think like failing fast is the best way to learn. And I think people that learn running businesses by doing it wind up being better business people than the people who learned it through theory.
Yeah. I would never have done a degree, but maybe just a little teaser. And that was one thing we always said at Screwtape. We're allowed to make as many mistakes as possible, but you are never allowed to make the same mistake twice.
Yeah, that's a really important thing.
Like,
in business,
learn
is creating
from
a space
everything.
where a person is allowed to fail, because you need to take risks, and risks often come with failure, and you never do anything great if you don't take any. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Ogre, you're absolutely right. Queensland is doing an amazing job with grants. I think the Queensland people, Tom, Jed, Finley, like I can't. Yeah, I feel like sometimes I'm a freaking cheerleader for these guys, because like me and Meg both, we made games we wouldn't otherwise have been able to make without the support of the Queensland grants. And so yeah, I'm going to always be a massive advocate for that here on this stream. Tori is asking, would you consider doing a talk at South by Southwest? Because I'd sit down and listen to your stories for hours.
Thank you
that's
so
really
much.
nice,
That's
Tori.
really sweet.
Thank
Sometimes
you.
I think I'm just rambling on, but I actually would love to. I kind of, this year, I decided not to apply for South by and to apply for New Zealand instead. But I think next year I will have to apply for South by Southwest. It's so big, it kind of scared me this year. And so New Zealand GDC is just a little bit smaller. So I kind of went for the easier route. But I think it's time. Also, if I always want to do GCamp. And they all back onto each other. New Zealand GDC is 2 weeks before GCamp, which is a week and a half before South by. And I can't take that kind of time off work anymore. Like, now that I do work for somebody else,
That's right.
there's a little bit of, you can't claim it all on tax because it's not for you.
Well,
you do little bits.
I don't know.
But not everything. Well, you probably can.
You can. I think you can.
Yeah.
I think you can say that's like professional development or any sort of number of things, but it's not. Yeah, it's not the same.
And I'm just never knowing what project's going to get dropped in my lap as well. But hopefully next year I'll apply for South by. Yeah.
I worked across the whole from the team that made the trailer from Call to the Land. That's really cool.
Oh,
Goldie.
cool.
Yeah.
And that's
Their trailer was very good. Their marketing was excellent.
Trailers are like, you don't realize what goes into a good trailer and how much work those teams are doing to make a really good trailer.
We were really lucky. We you know, in the same way that you worked across the hall from the team that made the trailer for Cult of the Lamb, Goldie, we, when Actuator's office was set up in Brisbane, we were next door to, really lucky to get next door to Model Farm. Model Farm, do you know Rangi Sutton? And
Met them once, yeah.
yeah, like incredibly talented visual effects guys. And they did our trailer. They did an amazing job on it. And that the advantage was we could just walk across the hall and be like, oh no, change these things, do that. Here's new footage. Here's
That
new
quick iteration.
There was this quick iteration where we just like we walked a USB stick back and forth from office to office. And yeah, it's really handy having, and the trailer's important. It's incredibly important. Like they sold out 3 days of merch in 15 minutes for Cult of the Lamb.
Yeah.
And in large part, it's probably because of things like their trailer doing so well, right? Night Streamer is saying the world economy is in a very, very strange phase with the global trade wars. Will this hit the game industry as well?
Yeah. Yeah. The second we hit it, once the economy is actually in recession, if it actually hits. So, because the world runs on the US dollar, every other country that is being outsourced to, when their dollar changes, it means they aren't as cheap anymore. Companies have to contract because, okay, our budget for the year, especially Australia, for example, the reason we all collapsed is they were American companies paying Australian dollars.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, their budget for the year was tripled overnight.
Yes.
Because, and they were hiring, like pandemic was pulling people from overseas.
Yeah.
So they were paying
Yeah.
well. So if someone was getting paid $300,000 a year Australian, and now, and that was
900,000
like,
suddenly overnight,
you know, 70 cents, and now it's 110, your budget is blown out, and the only thing you can do is just shut it down, cut it all, and start again. So unfortunately, I think the second...
I think personally, the Meg is absolutely right. The strength of the Australian dollar versus the US dollar caused the work to come to Australia in the first place. The fact that
we were cheap and pretty.
We were cheap. There wasn't a huge communication barrier. There wasn't a massive cultural barrier. The ways in which, like, the values between Australians and Americans was pretty well aligned. And so a lot of the work came here. And I think the thing that was the biggest catalyst in the collapse of the industry locally was the withdrawal of funding, because suddenly the Australian dollar became strong. In our current circumstance, the Australian dollar is still very weak against the US dollar, and those tariffs apply mostly to physical goods in a way that they don't apply to digital goods.
Yeah.
But what Meg is saying is still absolutely right. If it's the case that they go into recession,
if the US economy collapses,
then it's still going to have effect on those larger AAA studios, and the cost of living that going up consistently in, like,
means people just can't buy entertainment as much.
Yeah, inflation has corrected, but at the same time,
hopefully going to recorrect soon.
Yeah, sometimes though, in those like really tough times, people look towards escapism a little bit more, so that has a buffering effect. But on the whole, I think companies are going to struggle in a way that But I think it's just that applies across the entire economy, not necessarily to the games industry.
Yeah, it's all entertainment, especially because we're not a necessity. If people have to spend their money on a necessity, they won't spend it on going in that's why the film industry was having issues, because people aren't going to the movies because it costs too much.
Yeah.
But our local industries is what keeps it going. There's
absolutely
more as local Australian companies now than there were last time.
Yep.
So it won't decimate the industry, but it will definitely have an effect.
There's definitely more diffusion with talent and with the number of companies, and like there are less points for it to fail. I think it's more distributed. There's more smaller companies than there was back then, and so that'll probably help us out a lot. And in some sense, like, it may even cause, if the bigger companies fail, it may even cause those smaller ones to grow somewhat. But I mean, who knows? Luckily, the Academy of Interactive Entertainment, AIE, has a postgrad degree in games business, which I did to great benefit. Goldie, that's really cool. I wish there was something like that for me. I don't know, like...
I think Griffith might be either trying to or about to do a postgrad as well.
Have you seen what Jens has been working on lately? Like, if you guys know the games industry, you'll know IGEA. Is he their director?
Uh,
He certainly leads the whole show.
yeah.
He's
And
produced a
Ray.
really, really great games business course, which is just an online course you can do and go get a certification in. It'll tell you everything about like how to start a studio, how to get funding, how to find publishers, at what phase of the project to get your publishing money, what kind of grants are available to you, how to create a pitch deck. It's got like so much amazing content. You have to be an IGA member to access it. But at the same time, if you're a small studio, the cost of IGA membership is like
It's
nothing.
pretty low, and
It's really
it's
low. It's a few
worth
$100s a
it
year.
for the connection as well.
It's
IGA was
a-
actually one of the ones that supported us. Like
There
if
you
people
go.
came to them asking about porting,
Porting,
they
they would
direct
send it to you.
people to us.
Yeah, that's amazing. To put it in context as well, IGEA for its members has a contract pack. If you want to start a game studio, you can use their contract pack. The cost of having a lawyer draft the contracts that come for free in that pack is a fraction of the cost of the IGA membership.
And knowing
It's a
that,
no-brainer.
yeah, knowing that it's binding and knowing that it's been written by,
Yeah.
you don't want to be like me and write your own contracts for a while.
Yeah. Tori, you're saying that's fair. This year they've totally redesigned the gaming track. Interesting to see what they do with it. Yeah, you're referring here to AIE, I'm guessing, Tori. Dirty double again. PAX and South by Southwest. I'll also be going to PAX. Last PAX I went to, I exhibited on Point, and then like a week later I exhibited at South by Southwest, and I was completely burnt out by the end of it.
It's so draining.
It's so
right?
expensive and draining, and then you don't know if you're going to get your money back and all the other stresses and pressures of the company, and you focus on that event, and then at the end of it, it's like, whoa, just like a massive release of stress and tension at the end, in a way where it's like now you have to focus on every other problem that you put off while
And
you were
talk about
doing it.
Game Face having to be on
Yeah.
for like days and
Yeah.
days straight for
And
thousands
your
of
shoes
people.
and feet hurting, your back hurting. I'm looking forward to going back there, guys, and not exhibiting. I don't know that we'll exhibit. I think it's too late for us to even get slots to exhibit at this point.
Yeah, these days it
Yeah,
goes
you have to
really
get it really
quickly.
early, but yeah.
Yeah, I'll do Games Week. I don't know if I'll do PAX.
Yeah, I'll do PAX and Games Week. I'm in Melbourne now. It's a big thing for me.
Yeah.
So that'll be great. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to seeing a lot of you guys there.
Oh, Tori met you there last year.
Did he? He was lucky enough to meet. Yes, yeah. Okay, Tori. I'm gonna have to. When I see you again, I'm sure I'll connect the face to the name. But,
That's the fun thing about usernames, right?
Yeah, that's right. GCAP is a great week. If anybody is in the games industry and like Jess, you are asking about how to be, how to be a good studio director if you're introverted. At least get to, if you're going to do one thing in the
Go to
GCAP.
GCAP.
In the Australian game scene, go to GCAP.
And there is a whole leadership and management track.
Oh, is this my mic that's died? Yeah, it's mine. That's fine. Let's see. Thank you guys for letting me know. I mean, but that's just fine anyway. Mic died. Yeah, thank you guys. It's all right. We've got one microphone. We're at the end of this thing anyway. We're going to be wrapping it up.
That half an hour turned into...
Yeah, I mean, it didn't have to be a half an hour. This is exactly what I wanted it to be. I wanted it to be like a casual conversation, like the kind we'd have anyway if we're out getting a gin and just talking about stuff. So, yeah, this has been really fun. And I'm going to hand this back to Meg. Do you have any closing thoughts while I find somebody to raid? Here you go.
I hope I haven't turned anyone off. I actually think this is one of the most positive conversations I've had. Yeah. I find that after 18 years, I can get quite jaded about some of these topics.
I think people often appreciate hearing the honest truth.
That's why, especially losing so much money on my own game, I know that for a long time there was a lot of, not resentment, but it hurt. And I always want to let people know the truth behind it. But I also find that that's not always the most interesting conversation to have with someone either. The negative one. I kind of can't wait to see what games people make. I hope maybe someone in this stream is like, you know what? I actually really do want to do this. I've never actually thought I could. But God, if some weird little theatre kid from a small bogan town in Queensland can make games for 18 years, then I think, oh, and for the Americans in the crowd, bogan is pretty much redneck. So, but yeah, if I can do it and stick around for this long, yeah, do it and keep watching this full.
I hope you guys had fun. It sounds like a few of you really enjoyed yourselves. It did go for a great, an awesome time. You thought it was a great night, streamer? I mean, that's awesome. I've got more planned. If this one goes really well, then I'll be doing more of them. And I have a long list of very interesting people I'd love to talk about on the stream and talk with on the stream, rather. But I found somebody good. We're going to raid Dev. So get yourselves ready. Get the raid messages ready. Is Goldie around with our raid message to copy paste? Ready for the copy pasta? There we go. There it is. Thank you, Goldie. Really appreciate it. He's the best mod. He's the best mod. Okay, here we go, guys. We're going to tune into Dev. Thanks, Thomas, for chatting for the first time. I'm glad to see that there were some lurkers there enjoying themselves. Jess, thanks for your questions. Thanks for talking. Thanks everybody for asking such cool questions. And for, I know this was a different format from the usual one. So I really appreciate everybody sticking around for all this time to hear a bit about, about Meg and what she's doing and just like talk games in Australia too. So, all right. Have a great night, guys. Say hi to Dev for us. Here we go.
I'll take that. I almost got a dessert. Are you impressed, Chat? I'm impressed.